I'd like to call the meeting of the Willits City Council for December 13th to order. And I'll start off with pledge to the flag. Madge, could you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dolores, roll call.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Present.
Straub?
Present.
Ornstein?
Here.
Stransky?
Yes.
And Mayor Gonzalez.
Here. Well, I guess today is a kind of a special day, but also kind of a sad day. We are saying adieu to our retiring city manager, Adrienne Moore. And she started with the city in December of 2009 as our city clerk. And that's how I got to know Adrienne. Sad to say I didn't know her at the county. But then she became our interim city manager in 2013 and later ascending to the position of city manager. And she's ending her service with the city of Willits this month. In fact, not sure what your official last day is, but today's the day we're recognizing her. And again, it's both bittersweet and sad. I really respected and can count on her as a friend, and learned to rely on her, both as the police chief and later as the incoming mayor. And she gave a lot of her time. If you saw her in town, you got to see her in social functions, you got to see her at work, and usually that light in that office was on late at night because she was still on the job. So Adrienne, maybe you could step forward, and we have plaque and some things. Because of the cramped nature, I'll put you down here. Appreciation for your years of dedicated service to the city of Willits, December 2009 to December 2017, the city of Willits. Oh, sorry. Can you get the picture? Or you good? We have some other things here. Some cards. And we have a little gift. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, I know if anybody would like to, would you like to say something?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. This is really nice. I'm glad I was able to make it back to town. I've been up in Alaska for the last couple of months taking care of my family. And I've missed everyone at the city and in the community. It is very bittersweet to say goodbye. I will be, as many of you know, relocating out of the area, and I do plan to be back for visits on occasion. But it's just been my really profound privilege to serve the city and the community and work with such a fine group of professionals. I'm so proud of the team that the city has, and I want to see nothing but good things in the future.
I guess I'll open up city council.
Yes, and on behalf of the council, we'd like to thank you as well. I've only served on the council for a year, but I very much appreciate Adrienne's guidance and support, and I wish her all the best.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to say something else?
I am so glad that the whole 5 years that I have been on the council has been the time that Adrienne was the city manager, and she's been just a joy to work with. She's very unflappable and very honest and very competent, and she just is a people person, helps all of us. on the city staff, on the city council, and on in the community. And I just have had, the utmost confidence and admiration for what you've done for the city, and I hope we can carry on and fill those shoes as best we can. And I wish you very, very the best for your future ahead of you.
I have enjoyed working with you for all these years, and I wish you the best of luck going forward in the future.
Well, I'm going to miss you, Adrian. We've worked closely together for a lot of years, and spent so much time on the telephone talking about agenda items and what we're going to do about problems, and always considered you a very competent administrator and a good friend, and I just wish you the best. I'm so happy that you're going to be with your grandchildren and be able to spend your days with your family. That's just wonderful.
Adrian, again, thank you again, and like you know, the show must go on. All right. I'd like to say thank you for showing up for Adrian's last day, but I think you're all set. Okay, we are up to public communication. All right, the council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone may be given an opportunity to be heard. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, whenever any group of persons wishes to address the council on the same subject matter, the mayor may request that a spokesperson be chosen by the group. This item is limited to items under the jurisdiction of the city council which are not on the posted agenda. Public criticism of the city council, commissions, boards, and agencies will not be prohibited. No action shall be taken. And just to kind of explain that, if it's not on the agenda, we can listen, but we're not going to vote or do anything tonight. So some folks get kind of confused about that, but it's not that we don't care. It's just that we can only really discuss items that are agendized. But at this point, I will open it up to public communication, and if anybody would like to step up, please step up and state your name.
My name is Barbara Plaza. I'm the owner of 143 Franklin Avenue. I've been addressing the city council for so many times. I've asked Sabrina when we had the fire evacuation to open my property up to the city who needed help. I opened my property up, and I think there needs to be an ethics investigation with John Sherman, because now I'm cited for a nuisance for opening my property up for people who were evacuated and lost their home during the fire. And you know, Gonzalez, Stransky has been over at Bill Schaefer's house, and there really needs to be involvement with you guys seriously. I've been a target ever since I bought the property in 2014. When I got my permit to build my house May 25th between 7 a.m. and 7:45, my dog was poisoned on my property by Bill Schaefer. I am sick of this. You know, Mayor Gonzalez, all about this since I bought the property. You've upheld Bill Schaefer and all of his people. Stand up for me. I paid my taxes. I don't curse you guys out like Bill Schaefer has cursed John Sherman out for 15 solid minutes with vulgarity to get me off my land and cite me for as a nuisance. Thank you.
I guess anybody else, and please state your name.
My name is Cheryl Abney, and I have enjoyed living in Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park for 10 years until May of 2017, when Boa Vita Communities purchased our park, along with Valley Oaks and Easy Living in the county. Drita Bronchi and Abe Aragati were hired to oversee these parks. These two were formerly employed by Sierra Corporation and Court and Scott Financial Group. While they were at Sierra Corporation, 714 persons in Reseda Mobile Home Park in Reseda, California, including seniors and disabled people, lost their homes because of huge rent increases that they couldn't afford. Rent stabilization would have prevented this. The first thing Bronchi did was fire the on-site manager at Wagon Wheel, which they did not replace, a violation of California State Law number 18603, as parks with 50 or more units are required to have an on-site manager. After our manager was fired, Drita's intimidation tactics began, which included posting threatening letters on people's doors, threatening to take legal action against them for various reasons, such as overgrown landscaping, children's toys in the yard, excuse me, empty flower pots, ridiculous, and even threatening to evict Mexican people who disagreed with her. Another violation of California state law, AB 291, the Immigration Protection Act passed October 2017, and also a $2,000 fine. On November 1st, we received a $110 month rent increase, 22%, which Arigati advised would happen every November 1st. Merry Christmas! I did surveys this summer which revealed that 68% of residents in Wagon Wheel and Valley Oaks earn $25,000 a year or less, and they can't afford a $110 a year month increase, and without rent stabilization will lose their homes. Mobile home park owners have special prey. It's not like the supply and demand of apartments where if the rent goes up, you just move down the street. They can't afford $8,000 to $10,000 to move, and even if they could, where are they going to move it to? Parks don't accept old mobile homes. By the way, Wagon Wheel only has 9 mobile homes that can be moved. So sell, but when the rent is outrageous, it decreases the value of your home. So you can't sell it and you can't move. You end up losing your home to big city investors that resell it or re-rent it, making a fat profit off of poor people. It may be legal, but this is a moral crime. Federal law mandates that all cities in the United States provide affordable housing for their community. Wagon Wheel is the only affordable housing in the city of Willits that's not government subsidized. I've stepped up to help my friends and neighbors in this community of Wagon Wheel. I spent hours of time doing research, talking to other advocates who educated me, not to mention the money spent on copies, going door to door to talk to people, and hand out meeting notices. I'm now asking you to step up and to help us keep our homes by passing rent stabilization, because if you don't help us keep our homes, we will be living in your streets. I'm asking for rent stabilization just for the park, not for the whole city. Thank you for your time, and I'm requesting this to be put on the agenda, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
I have one. Thank you for the packet, it was very thorough, but I didn't see the current park rules and regulations.
I can get that for you. I don't have one with me, but I'll be glad to provide you with one.
I think that affordable housing in the city is a really big issue, and as the mayor has explained, we can't, take any action today, but I would like to see this on our agenda and have our staff look into what our options might be.
I think, Bob, maybe the direction would be that we have staff look at this and bring it back when they've done a thorough analysis.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Carolee Shamus. I work with the Golden State Manufactured Owners League, which has been around since 1962, advocating for mobile home owners. A few things that I think are really important for you to understand is that rent stabilization is not a rent freeze. That's the first thing. It guarantees automatic annual rent increases. I come from Sebastopol. I work up and down the state with mobile homeowners.
Excuse me, folks. Can you keep it down? She's speaking.
And there's a big movement on where people are joining LLCs, and there's no accountability for who these people are and who owns your park. So many of us who bought parks back in the day when it was mom and pop owners are facing some really awful problems, and they're going on up and down the state. In addition, the rent, ours is tied to the CPI for San Francisco, which is high. So yours might do better to be tied with COLA or something else if you can. There are over 100 jurisdictions in California that have rent stabilization, and there are many good models you can choose from to make it your own so that it suits your city. You don't have to do anything that doesn't make sense for you. But when you have all these people who bought into your community, these people own their homes. I just want to make sure you all understand that. And this for many of them, it's their last investment. And if you allow these park owners, these predatory park owners, to come in and take their homes away, where are they going to go? You're responsible for making sure there's some affordable housing. And as was said before me, we're not subsidized. We own our homes. We pay for them, except for maybe Section 8 if you have that. But it's really important. There's flexibility in these stabilizations. There's good model ordinances to work with. What's happening with these companies buying up parks, they're destabilizing our communities. Real people are getting hurt and they can't recover. Manufactured housing is an important part of our housing strategy, and affordable housing is essential for every city up and down our state. So you have to do something, and I'm urging you to put it on the January agenda to talk about rent stabilization. You've got Cheryl, who's been working on this with other people for a long time, learning from other cities that already have enacted ordinances, so she can help you. And you guys are way behind. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is really essential protection for mobile homeowners. Even if you don't do rent control for the rest of your citizens, you really have to do rent control to help people keep their homes in your community. You can't let these predatory park owners just come in and rip their homes out, because what they do then is they just rent them out and bypass all of the laws, and nobody has any recourse for anything. So we're asking you, yes, sir?
I was going to ask you to sign in if you could, so that the clerk
Sure.
can put your name down.
I'd be happy to answer any other questions. This is such an important topic. I mean, we've got cities like Antioch that are doing senior overlays and really fancy things, and the main thing is just to get rent stabilization. Only for mobile home parks, because these people bought into your community. It's different than renting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Roop. I own 425 South Main Street. It's a commercial property. It's probably on your list of properties that need to be registered and maintained and all of that. That's, I guess, going to come later in the day. I don't think I'm going to run into any problems with that because I have now have the money and the time and everything to work on my property and to make it a viable commercial property. I'm running into some issues. Difficult to get a lot of things done in Willits, but I really don't know what you're going to let me do there. I really don't know what kind of business you're going to let me have in there.
David, can I thought you were speaking on, this is actually on our agenda, if you want to wait till we can actually discuss that with you or talk with you, but at this point, this is public communication.
Okay.
So you're welcome to continue, but you're not going to get any interaction from us if you'd like to wait.
Well, I'm just basically introducing myself and that I am ready to move forward and get my property back to a, tax-paying position for you folks. And I really need to get some cooperation with the council and people to figure out what you're gonna let me do there, because I can't remodel. One size doesn't fit all with the remodel, so we're gonna need to hopefully work together and move forward with the right kind of business to put in there. Okay.
My name's Bill Gross, and I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council. And this is also in relation to Dave Roop. I'd like to formally request that a potential special use permit for cannabis medical activity. I know that it's considered now in the zoning. The properties that are available in the city of Willits are far and few between based on the current zoning that's allowed. I'd like to see if there's an opportunity for a special use permit or a case-by-case basis on property, including Mr. Roop's 425, and to see if there's anything that we can do to alleviate some of the restrictions that have been imposed on those businesses like us, local businesses that want to put in a medical cannabis activity dispensary in the city of Willits, and the availability of current properties are just not out there, and we want to see if there's an opportunity to look at specific location by location C1 properties that might fall into the area of something to do. And I just wanted to formally go on record to the city council that we'd like to see if that's something that we could go forward with and at a future date.
So, all right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Cordova, and I live at 1750 South Main Street, Space 110, and I'm a homeowner. I bought my house with all of my retirement. And the mayor, at the first meeting, you said there was nothing you could do for us, and then you said we had to go to the state, so I went to the state, what's his name? Mike McGuire's office, and I went to Jim Wood's office, and both offices told me that there was nothing that they could do. I'm feeling desperate. I'm feeling like I'm gonna be out of my everything. God, we need help, and I'm not the only person. I mean, this whole room is in that same situation. So we are begging you for help. I don't know where to go anymore. I don't know what to do. Please help us. Sorry, get a little emotional about it.
I'd like to respond. I just want
Yes.
I'd like to share with you that my mom lived in Easy Living Mobile Home Park, and in 2011, the property manager at the time had began giving notices similar to what you're all experiencing with rent increase and clean up the clutter, those types of things. The park wasn't in a healthy condition, and I did just what you did. I went to Department of Housing, I filed complaints, and I know that the process isn't easy. It's complaint after complaint that I had to file before Department of Housing would come out and do something. Eventually, the property owner was fined, and I believe spent about $50,000 to improve the property, but unfortunately, retaliatory efforts were made towards my mom while she went there, and over the course of the coming years, I spent $10,000 of my own money based on principle to try and fight the property owner to ensure that not only my mother but all the residents in the community were protected. And I understand that it is a hard uphill battle to get protections in a mobile home park.
And the lady, the same people, investors now own Easy Living.
I know
And they
how-
own like 3 different places in this city.
I understand your challenges, and I also understand that the Department
you.
of Housing, you have to meet, they don't deal with a lot of issues. They're very limited in the scope of what they'll respond to, and so the only way to really be heard is in numbers, so, yeah.
Yeah, well, here we are in numbers, so.
I apologize that you're all in this situation. I sympathize with you, and sounds like the council will look into the matter further.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak?
I do, but I don't want to go over there. Can I stand here?
Could you state your name?
Can you hear me? I come out of my sick bed, Connor tonight, because we need numbers.
Could you state your name?
Arlene Terry. And I've been in there 41 years. Rent was $65 a month. So can you imagine, what it is now, jumped up. So many of us, and some of those that are, I'm retired, but so many of us are a little older than me, but you pay your bills, and you don't have money enough left for food. For this rich company to come in here and give us $110, they'd raise $50 for your yard, they called it, and it was really a bad deal. But they have not given us even rent, the proper release papers or nothing, but I just wanted to voice your opinion, because it's jumped a lot, and we need help. We all are homeschooled, like we said, we're in there, they're paid for, we can't go anywhere, we can't afford the space. So I hope you guys will take it into consideration and help us all somehow. Thanks.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to something not on the agenda, or?
My name is Robert Chevalier, and I'm a homeowner at Valley Oaks. And 3 other individuals have asked me to indicate that I'm representing them, one of whom is severely disabled and can't attend himself. I think I urge you to consider rent stabilization. I know it's working in Ukiah, and we desperately need something here. I don't know if any members of the council have taken, any observations of the Willits economy recently, but we're already hemorrhaging money to a critical degree. In addition to the damage created by the bypass, we have to also deal with the fact that Safeway's payroll has been cut effectively by about 30%, just because the old-timers have either been kicked out, dehired, or retired. And the people that are being hired will never, ever get to the top wages that the old-timers were getting. So you already have a class of people who are going to need things like low-cost housing or small investment housing, and it won't be available. Talking to these people is difficult. I keep getting stonewalled by these Boa Vita people. I don't have the money to hire the kind of investigators I need to prove to myself that this isn't laundered Coke money that's buying these places. So that's one thing that, these people do not listen to reason. The people who occupy these homes, and Valley Oaks works. It just plain works. Everybody seems to have a desire to create harmony in the neighborhood. These people are actually the bedrock of the economy of the town. And they have no place to go. If you lose these people, you're going to lose huge amounts more. A city has a duty to protect itself, and to do that, it has to protect all of its citizens. And grocery outlet, places like that, they need these people. They need us. And we need you to take a look at the policies that enable us to have a life. Some people here are on fixed incomes and are not going to be able to buy food with rent increases.
You're out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
Well,
I do
thank
want
you.
to point out, I know you said you live at Valley Oaks, and I just want to point out for the folks here that you don't have jurisdiction in Valley Oaks or in the county. It's just in the city.
I understand that, sir. However, the issue is, I know that if Willits were to embrace rent stabilization along with Ukiah, the Board of Supervisors might not feel so bashful about this issue, and they may actually, I believe the expression is grab the bull by the horn.
Is
Thank you.
anybody else interested in speaking? Could you state your name for everybody? I know who you are, but
Where do we go to since we're the county?
you need to talk to the Board of Supervisors.
In Ukiah?
Yes. You talk with, I believe, Mrs. Krosky came to at least one of the meetings I was at. She came to the afternoon meeting, I went to the afternoon, she went to the morning meeting.
Because you know, as mobile homeowners, even out there, we never, even before these people bought, we never had a manager on site over in the Valley Oaks or in the one in town. So, and then these new people that come in, we never got a notice saying that our rent was due from the 1st to the 7th. And now, one lady, she got $67 late charge because she paid on the 7th. We have
Yeah,
some rights, in other words.
yeah, I think you can contact the Board of Supervisors by phone. Yeah, you could call by phone there too. Did you want to say something?
I would go there, but, quick point, I've done a little research. The people that took over it are Flyer Gasoline, based in Auburn. Boa Vida is owned by Flyer Gasoline. All the paperwork is registered to the CEO of Flyer Gasoline. So, Flyer Gasoline.
Okay. Do you know who he is? Yeah, he's one of our press people.
In other words, I call your number and talk to you later.
No, not my number. I'm not in the, this is the city of Willits. You need to call the Board of Supervisors.
I can understand what you're telling me.
Yeah. All right, does anybody else from the public want to speak? If you could come up, state your name.
I'm Robert McAdams, I live in Valley Oaks. I'm curious, we live and work in Willits, why do we have to go to Ukiah for help?
Again, we don't have jurisdiction. You live in the county.
Okay, thank you.
So what about us people that do live in the wagon wheel?
Okay, again, you're here talking to us.
Yeah.
And we're going to agendize this as soon as staff has a chance to look at this. So,
I'm scared to death. I've been living there for 17 years, a long time.
could you come to the, and state your name? And could you sign in?
My name is Monica Zunich. We've had a couple of businesses in this town that we managed to earn a little mobile home, and it's not a modular, it's just a mobile home. But right now, for my retirement and the SSI I get, I didn't have any money for food like that lady said. I paid my bills and that was it. I don't know what I'm gonna do, I'm scared. I go looking for jobs, but it's hard to find a job once you've been an owner. They steer away from you, you know, like you're poison. So it took me 3 years to find a job that I kept for 10 years, and I found myself run out by a bar. And it wasn't okay. It was not okay what happened to me. And I don't want to lose my home too. They grabbed my laundromat, but they want my home too, and I'm scared. And it's some kind of game that everybody's playing, and I wasn't taught certain things. I don't know what these guys are doing. I've asked. I've even been told, well, it's not my fault you don't know what you're doing. Well, what do you mean? Because I'm paying my rent and I'm working. And it seems to me that the girl next door hasn't worked a day in her life, and she's got brand new windows in her house. You know, I'd like to have that. They told me no. You tell me. They told me no, but they give it to the lady next door. And it's not okay. I don't have enough. My PG&E went up down behind the Sonoma Power, and I wasn't even home very much last month. My electric bill $64, $17.95 or something. It has to do with this new power that we have, and well, sometimes my PG&E is only $13.50. This month it was $64 and something. They took my deposit away that they're supposed to be giving me. They literally took it away and paid this coming bill that I wasn't even home, but you know, popping in and out. I had to work. Cleaning houses just ain't cutting it. There aren't very many jobs to be found here, and when you're gonna run them out over a bar, that's pathetic. I've had nothing but trouble come from that bar over into my house. Nothing but trouble come from that bar into my laundromat. It was all I could do to run those people out, and now you just brought them back in, and they're all standing out there again. It's not okay. If you're not gonna let somebody have a regular business, a decent business, and it's all about cannabis and liquor, and it's not okay. Those people from Clovelo and Laytonville needed my laundromat. They needed me. I went there for them. I was asked to go there. I worked very hard just to make those corporation people get every single dime. And then a bar moved in, and I'm literally beaten out of my laundromat, literally tricked and told I had to leave or else I would die because of that bar.
Ma'am, you're out of time.
It's not, okay, I'm sorry, I'm done.
Do we have anybody else that would like to speak?
Tina, does your group want to?
We're here for an agenda item. Thank you. Unless anybody has anything to say about
Good evening. I apologize for reading this off of here, but I didn't want to miss any topic. My name is Jean Jennings. I live in what is now known as Willits Mobile Home Park for the last 27 years. I'm 76 years old. I also care for a 96-year-old mother who also lives in the park and has for the last 30 years. I stand before everybody representing numerous senior citizens that live in our park and have for 20, 40, and more years. Due to disabilities, they couldn't attend tonight, so I thought, okay, I'll help try and state their plea. Many of us moved here in Willits and to the Willits, Willits Mobile Home Park now, hoping to live out our lives secure in our hearts and minds, that we would live in a peaceful and loving community, which we have up until May. In place of our peace came threats, harassment, chaos, and unthinkable stress to the tenants. There's a very old saying that tyrants will always find a way to practice their tyranny, and boy, do we know it. First excuse was, okay, due to property taxes and realignments, we have to raise the rent $60. Not too long after that came, well, those yard discounts that we've been giving, or has been given for the last 5 or 6 years, no longer apply, which, do the math, it's $110 a month more. Speaking just for myself, I have to rely on Social Security. I got a notice from Social Security last week. I get a whole $1 a month more. My rent went up $110. Basic math tells me that with no further rent increases for 2018, my rent will be almost unaffordable. The senior housing in our community has been sorely taxed. There is no place. There are people that have been on waiting lists for years.
You're out of time, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
But
If you have a
please,
letter or something, if you could provide it to Dusty, and he'll be leading the charge
be
on.
happy to. Thank you for your time.
Do I have anybody else that would like to speak?
If we send a letter, we send it to the.
Just send it to, no, if you're in the county, you would send it there, but if you're in the city,
No, I'm in the city.
all right, you could send it to the city of Willits. Actually, you could send it attention to Dusty Dooley, our planner.
And you can also attention the city council members if you want us to read that as well.
Yeah, it'll come back to, all of this will come back to us, and my hope is that we would have staff do an impartial analysis and get all the information before us, before it comes back to us.
Do we have any idea about when this is planned to come back? I know, I don't know how far along you are on the process, or if you've even started it. But I guess this is going to be your baby. Do you have any sense of when we could actually address this?
Mr. Mayor, I think Dusty and I probably would share that, you know, and I know Dusty's got a lot on his plate right now. I'm suggesting that the council's indicated they want it back in January. In order to allow sufficient time, I would suggest the second meeting in January, especially with the holidays coming on. That would be helpful.
So just for the audience, so you understand what's going on here right now, state law prevents us from having a full discussion on this item unless it's been agendized. So all we can do right now is listen to you and hear what you're saying and then take action. At the January meeting, where this will come back, now this will be a full-blown discussion. We will, you know, we will have documents to read, we'll have testimony, we'll have discussion, and we'll be able to take action at that point.
And that action could be that we want staff to look at something in particular, or that we want action that day, et cetera. So
But this is the process, and that's the way something will get going. I mean, if it seems to you like we're sitting here with stone faces and, you know, don't care what you're saying to us, that's not true. It's just that we're prevented by law from actually going any further than we've gone right now. But rest assured, action will be taken sometime next month. So come on back and we'll listen to you again.
Madge, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to, first of all, commend you for all showing up, and that it's very, very important for decision makers to hear from you what you're going through, and also commend you for this very extensive packet of information, which will help a lot in you know, figuring out some of the options that we might have in the city. And unfortunately, those of you who are in county, unincorporated area beyond city limits, will have to go through the same process at the county. So be persistent and expect to come to a lot of meetings, because it makes a difference if you show up. It's the only way things get done, and Cheryl especially has been really diligent on this, so thank you for being here.
Did you want to speak again?
Yes, I'd like to make one last comment. I think that they need to put on the city council meeting to look into the ethics violation of John Sherman, the code enforcer. And I'd also still would like to know why I was held at gunpoint on November 6, 2015, when you were Chief Gonzalez by Sergeant McNally on my property and I was almost shot. You still failed to do this. Adrian Moore has known about this since 2016, and so have you. Give me a response, please, because Priscilla Tarver knows all about what's been going on since I bought my property at 143 Franklin Avenue
Thank you all
in
for
2014.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if that's the end of public comment, you might want to take a short break.
Hey, folks, unless I have somebody else that wants to speak on something else, we're going to take a quick recess, 5-minute recess. And now we are to item 3, public matters. And what's on the list here is nomination and appointment of mayor and nomination and appointment of a vice mayor. And I am going to turn it over to our city manager, Bob Perrault, to run this part of it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll be happy to facilitate the process on behalf of the mayor and the city clerk. As you're aware, the first meeting in December is the meeting in which officers are changed. This includes both the office of mayor and the office of vice mayor. We'll go through the process of nomination and selection of the mayor, followed by nomination and selection of the vice mayor. After those 2 officers have been selected, I would suggest that at that time we change the gavel if necessary, and seats and whatever else needs to be done. All right. With that, I would like to entertain a motion for the office of mayor.
I would like to nominate Madge Strong, please, for mayor.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to nominate Madge Strong. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other nominations for the office of mayor? Hearing none, the nominations for the office of mayor are closed. And with that, I'll direct the clerk to entertain a voice vote.
City Council Member Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Ornstein?
No.
Stransky?
Yes.
Yes.
With that, you've elected Madge Strong as your new mayor, and now I'll entertain a motion for the nomination of a council member to serve as the vice mayor.
I'd like to nominate Jerry Gonzalez as vice mayor.
Jerry Gonzalez has been nominated by Councilmember Strong. Is there a second? Hearing no second, that motion would fail. Is there another nomination for vice mayor?
I will nominate Larry.
I'll second.
No.
No? Okay.
So we still need if we could, I still would entertain, you made the motion, but then it was declined by Mr. Stronsky, so we'll go back to entertaining another motion for vice mayor.
I nominate Ron Ornstein.
I'll decline that, thank you.
Mr. Ornstein has been nominated and has declined, so we still need to select a vice mayor.
I nominate Sabrina.
I'll second the motion.
Sabrina Rodriguez has been nominated by Larry Stronsky for the office of vice mayor, and that has been seconded by Madge Strong. I would ask for a voice vote.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Ornstein?
No.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
All right, with that, the officers have been selected for this year, and it's time to switch seats. The name tags, we'll need to rearrange those. Maybe Dolores, if you want to help with that.
Sorry. For electing me mayor, and I will do my best to do a good job, and look forward to hearing any feedback that you may have of suggestions for improving it, and I'm really glad that Sabrina will be my vice mayor as well. So, moving on, we have a public hearing and discussion of a possible introduction, reading, title, and waiving further reading of a proposed ordinance for Chapter 8.28 of the Willits Municipal Code entitled Vacant Commercial Property Registration and Property Maintenance relating to the required registration and maintenance of vacant commercial buildings. And Bob, do you want to say anything, or should I turn it over to Dusty?
We'll just go ahead and turn it over to Dusty at this point.
Dusty Dooley.
Before you do, I'd just like to make a motion that we move item 8B after item 4C, in the interest of, we have some young people here that would like to speak this evening, and we want them to get home at a decent hour to do their homework and such, so I would ask that we move 8B to after 4C.
What about putting it now instead of, because it probably won't take that long?
Do we have a time on the?
public hearing?
As far as I know, there was any time, it was probably noticed for 6:30,
This isn't a timed item.
so you're
Would that be
okay.
okay with you, Dusty? Okay, so we're moving to item 8. Which one?
Sorry, 8B.
And actually, Madam Mayor, I'll be giving the staff report on 8B. As you may recall, at our last meeting, then Vice Mayor Stransky brought up the issue of the secondary access for the Brook Trails area. That was discussed by council, and as a result of that discussion, the council directed that staff prepare a letter indicating to the Board of Supervisors that the City of Willits strongly supports moving forward with a second access to the Brook Trails area. And I have taken the time to develop that letter on the council's behalf. The letter is attached for your consideration. Essentially, it recognizes that at least the board has taken the position of moving forward and has appointed a subcommittee to begin discussing access issues, including those at Brook Trails, and suggests that we be a part of any kind of discussion down the road that would involve Brook Trails in particular, since we are an adjacent impacted community. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and of course, there's members of the public that would like to address the item.
Okay. All right, so I'm opening the public hearing on item 8B, and any of the public that would like to address that item, please come forward and state your name, and you have a 3-minute limit.
Hi, I'm Veronica Van Orsdale, and I'm a member of Youth Advocates. I'd like to thank you all for recognizing this issue because it's very important to me. I think there should be a third exit in the middle of Brook Trails, possibly out from the Brook Trails Airport. The people past the bridge by First Gate up where I live can take the back way heading up towards Laytonville. The people at the beginning end of Sherwood can take Sherwood Road down as usual. Then the people stuck in the middle get kind of trapped, especially in an emergency when there's 5,000 or more people trying to get out of the same two places at the same time, when the roads can't really fit that many cars in the first place. I think it would be good having a place that connects from the airport to either North Main Street or Highway 101. Not only is it good for an emergency, but it is good for daily travel as well. There are many people that walk or bike up and down the hill every day, and it's not very safe for them to go down Sherwood Road with how little space on the sides of the road there is. If we made a connection, we could make the road be wide enough to have bike lanes and possibly sidewalks, so people who choose to walk or bike down the hill can get down the hill in a much safer way. But there are also some people that don't really have a choice, and they have to walk or bike up and down the hill because they don't have access to a car. It would also save some people a lot of time from having to go out of their way to go down the hill completely if they're just going back to take the bypass or just go to the high school. Thank you for your support on this matter. I hope Brook Trails can be a safer place for all of us.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Victoria. I'm a member of Youth Advocates. I live in Brook Trails, and I think that having a second access to Brook Trails is a good idea, because I remember how during the Redwood Complex fire, my family and I were so worried about what would happen if the fire was to reach Brook Trails. We were scared that if the main road was to catch on fire, we would be trapped. It was a scary experience. My parents were worried about me, my sister, and my brother's safety. Having a second road would be very helpful because if there were to be a fire, there would be so much traffic and it wouldn't be safe. If there were so many people in a rush to get out, there would most likely be an accident. A second road would help people get out quicker and it would be less chaotic. Thank you for taking this project into consideration. It would be very helpful and useful, not just for my family and I, but for everyone who lives in Brook Trails.
Is there anybody else who would like to address this item on our agenda? Oh, yes, if you wouldn't mind, the two of you who did speak already, just sign in, because otherwise it's really hard to get the spelling of names for our minutes. And, yes, so now, is there no other comment? We'll bring it up here and talk to it from the council. Yes,
Well,
Jerry.
I know Larry brought it up, but that, I think Brook Trails and Willits are kind of synonymous in a lot of ways. I lived up there for a while, and fire was always, I think, when I lived up there, it was right after the Oakland Hills fire situation, and having a third or another alternative exit out of there is important. I think we've all recognized that, and that was the purpose, I think, of Larry bringing that, and I think, I hope everybody here supports that letter, so.
Any other council member comments? And
I agree with Jerry. I definitely support the additional access. Brook Trails, not only as a resident up there, I lived there for 20 years, you worry about getting stuck up there if there's a fire, but you also worry about the condition of the road coming down the hill. I always worried that when my children got older, that one would have an accident coming down Sherwood Road, because it isn't the best maintained road. And indeed, it came to fruition and had a child who was in a serious accident, and I support any improvements to the Sherwood Road. But I'd also like to commend the Willits Youth Advocates for coming here this evening and showing the leadership skills that they have and standing up for an issue that they feel is important to them. So thank you, ladies.
So do I hear a motion to?
I'll move.
Okay.
Second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, let's have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Ornstein?
Yeah.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Strong?
Yes. So this is just approving that we are sending a letter to the Board of Soups to ask them to really prioritize and move this project along. Thank you very much. So we will go back to item 3C, which I already had read, but Dusty's going to introduce this item, vacant commercial building regulations.
Yeah, tough act to follow. So this is discussion and possible introduction, reading the title of and waiving further reading of proposed ordinance adding chapter 8.28 to the Willits Municipal Code. The ordinance is entitled the Vacant Commercial Property Registration and Property. It's the title of the Vacant Commercial Property Ordinance, and it's regarding the registration and property maintenance relating to the required. That's an error.
It's a mouthful.
That's what you get for trying to read something that I wrote. So just real quickly, what you have in front of you is the agenda summary. And then you had the ordinance as it was written at the time it was passed out to you. Our city clerk has a couple additional versions of the ordinance to hand out to you.
Versions,
one
are they different?
Yeah, staff has found a few just, I would call them minor revisions. You're going to have an edited version and a clean version, edited showing you the changes that were completed. Most of it was essentially wordsmithing. You'll see it here. Nothing of any substantive change, I don't believe. Just some little fine tuning there.
We don't have handwritten in the margins, we have that.
Yeah, right. Hopefully that's valuable too and easy to understand what changes were made.
Thank you.
And that's not always the preferred way to do it, but in this situation, I thought it was appropriate in case we're able to move forward on this item tonight. And certainly we don't have to. That's at the council's discretion. So just very quickly, this was really born out of your Revitalization Economic Development Committee. When I met with them, we essentially looked at a variety of issues that we may want to consider taking on. And by a wide margin, the committee was very passionate about the issue of vacant commercial buildings, certainly in our downtown area, but all throughout the city. And my initial thought was, oh, okay, we need to do a better job of looking to attract businesses to Willits and filling up some of these empty spaces, and that certainly remains the case. But in looking to the issue further, it appeared that that wasn't the only issue involved with making use of these vacant buildings. We came to realize that in some cases, and I would say that this is from talking with members of the community, but also folks that were looking to establish businesses within our city, that there weren't a lot of locations that were, I'll say, turnkey ready for them. They weren't in a condition to be rented out, or they had difficulty finding locations that were reasonably priced, or they even reported of disinterested owners that for one reason or another just were okay with leaving the building vacant. This has been a tough nut to crack. It's been a struggle to walk the line of trying to present a tool and ordinance that both respects the rights of private property owners, but also attempting to introduce the community cost of, in some cases, choosing to leave your property, your building vacant. Besides sort of that, what's also intertwined in here is public safety. So, many of these buildings have been vacant for a long time. Some jurisdictions will term them, chronic vacancies. And, it may be that some of these buildings have fallen into a level of disrepair that could cause a public safety issue. There's been property maintenance issues where if buildings aren't properly secured, people are able to get inside of them. You could have folks using them to do drugs. You could have them certainly looking for shelter and then starting fires, which can obviously cause a safety issue. And so, it became important to try and get our, specifically our building official and our fire department into some of these buildings to ensure their safety. We already have a tool on the book that our code enforcement officer can use to deal with blighted buildings or those buildings that are in a state of disrepair and are causing a public safety issue. What this ordinance attempts to do in part is better identify what the city's expectations are of property owners as far as maintaining their property. It also looks to require an annual inspection by our building official and our fire department. It also requires that you register your vacant property if it's been vacant for more than 90 days. It allows the council to establish a registration fee that would allow us to recoup our cost for services, whether it's maintaining the registration database, certainly covering the cost of inspections. We also have an increase to the need for police services in responding to some of these vacant buildings. It also, one of the issues in speaking with our code enforcement officer is a lot of times when he contacts property owners and reminds them of the need to secure their building or maintain landscaping, fix a broken window, etc. Some of these owners are, not just out of Willits, but out of the state or out of the country. And so what the ordinance asks for is that you identify a local property manager, and it can be your cousin or your brother, your friend, but just somebody so that if they do have to, if the city has to contact you, we know we've got somebody that's in the area and can do a better job of responding to any of these issues. I think while all those things that I just addressed are certainly important, it may be that, and I should also say that if a property's been vacant, just became vacant, hopefully by registering your property with the city. And again, we've yet to establish what that registration fee might look like, and it can certainly start at a smaller scale the first year and then escalate up to something. But again, just like with the cannabis ordinance, when we with that, we're looking to only recoup our cost of services. It's a fee, it's not a tax or something beyond that. I lost my train of thought for a second, sorry.
I think you were going to say the city can help provide, interested renters can find out what's available.
Exactly, right. So hopefully it becomes a tool. We often get calls from prospective folks wanting to do business, and it'd be nice to have a list with a lot of the property information, contact info, and we can hopefully help match up prospective business folks with property owners. What folks very clearly articulated to staff on the Revi Ed level, and I was just to say that was a great committee to work with, especially on this issue, because we had real estate agents, local business owners, council members, the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. And so you essentially already had many of the stakeholders already at the table, and certainly we did vet it with police, fire, and city manager, et cetera. This is an old enough product that it's all previous city managers, previous fire chiefs, and police chiefs. But I certainly appreciated the wide variety of talent and background that went into helping craft this ordinance. But what this ordinance may not accomplish, but was certainly a concern and a desire of the folks on the Revi Ed committee, is how do we essentially force somebody to do the right thing, right? How do you fully introduce the community cost of choosing to leave your property vacant, right? If you're a business, it's not nice to have two vacant buildings next to you. If you're a business owner and you're trying to rent out your space, it doesn't help that the two properties next to you are dilapidated and causing some level of blight. So we're staff certainly interested in hearing from the council as to whether this is aggressive enough, or if we want to explore tools to maybe seek further methods for really encouraging property owners to make use of their property. So I think with that, I'll stop talking and certainly answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Jesse. So would any members of the public like to?
The council first.
Well, I'd like to hear from the public first.
Go ahead.
My name is Ruby Petchock, and I guess I have one of those empty commercial properties. I'm a little confused about what's going on, because I'm there 3 days a week, easy. I've had really very little support from the city. I maintain my property the best I can, and everybody else's. I have my damn friends trained when they go by to check on it and pick up trash. And not too many months ago, I had a potential buyer that was really interested. But they spent 3 days in Willits, and they weren't interested any longer. One of their first questions was, what's going on in the house north of you, north of this building? Kind of see for yourself. I think everybody in town knows. And they said, there's no enforcement in this town. We walk the streets and there's dog crap all over the sidewalks. We even ran into a horse. Then we went to Safeway and fought the vagrants and got into Safeway, and we had to fight the dogs. And they said, what are they going to do about the marijuana in this town? Well, it was up for a vote about that time, and I actually talked to Larry one day outside the council meeting, and I told him I was really disappointed that he had changed his mind on the marijuana. I said, I think I'm going to lose a sale over that. And his comment was, well, we have to worry about getting water to 4,000 people, which I understand. But as far as having a vacant building and being happy about it, I can't imagine any owner wanting a vacant building. I have a real estate agent. I've always had a real estate agent. My property is not overpriced. I'm ready to practically give it away. And as far as any help, I mean, you can drive a car in the potholes in the street behind the restaurant. The gutters are always filthy. I've been in here complaining about that. I clean up in front of my places. And I've been down there working 3-4 hours, go the next day, the street sweeper's been by and left enough dust or dirt in there for a garden. And I remember early on, the Greyhound bus used to go down Oak Street and go behind the restaurant through that alley. And they were going over the sidewalk, busting it up, coming in and demanding that we move our vehicles and our cars, and my customers move their cars. And we did this 3 or 4 times, and finally I said, you have no business coming down here, we're not moving again. Well, the next time they called the cops on me. I had called David Madrigal. I called the city. I was dealing with David Madrigal at the time. I said, look at this bus is tearing up the sidewalk. There's 2 big chunks, you can tell, and not just the bus, but it wasn't helping. And that wasn't a designated route. I had called Greyhound, and they said, oh, that's not a designated route. They shouldn't be going down there. So one day the driver comes in. It's in the middle of July. It's busy, and demands that we move. And I said, I'm not moving. You're going to have to back out on Main Street. Well, I'm going to call the cops. They said, you go right ahead. This is my property, and I'm not moving. I had my car right on the edge of my property. Well, a local officer came down and threatened to arrest me if I didn't move my car. And I told him that'd be the worst mistake you ever made in your life. And I'm not moving. And unfortunately, I made the bus back out on Main Street in July. One time we had somebody come through the roof or the side of the building on top, and they swung down in front of our motion detector, and my alarm system went off 1:30 at night. My sister-in-law and I meet the police down there. They go in, and they're irritated because I know those alarm systems malfunction some. And they said, oh, you probably had a mouse or something run through there. And we said, we don't have mice. And my sister-in-law was really concerned. She said, this movement, somebody has to be in or had been in here. The doors were all locked and everything. Well, they left us. And my sister-in-law insisted we go through the complete building again, which the police had done. Well, none of us looked up. Well, somebody had taken the siding off the building on top, came through the attic, stepped on the pipes and broke them. We go to work the next day, and we have a water leak. So I call a plumber, and he's going, you better get somebody out here. You know, your siding's been taken off. Well, what happened, they take the siding off, came through the attic, and they swung down and went in front of the window, and the alarm went off. Well, the police just left us there. And we don't know if those people were in the attic when we were still there or not by ourselves. And I'm thinking, I do everything I can to keep my building up. It's not for sale, it's not for rent. I am not going to deal with that. I deal with the bums every day. I have people, there's no shelter in the back, but we have people sleeping at the back door. I pick up trash constantly. I was down there today picking it up. And I really don't think I want to pay the city for having a vacant building. I haven't talked to an attorney yet, but I think I'm going to. I'm just confused as what's going on. You know, and I've heard all these stories about, oh, people don't care about having a vacant building. I don't know. I'm not lumped into that, but because I do care, and I've always had an agent. But I've looked at some of the local businesses in town that are occupied, and it's pretty disgusting. So, you know, I'm thinking, well, maybe the city should be paying me. I really think I lost a potential buyer because of the shape the city's in, and we do not have any enforcement. And I'm not putting the police department down because I don't know what they do, but I know they haven't done much for me. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that would like to address this issue?
Hi, my name's Allison Finley, and I'm here on behalf of the Willits Chamber of Commerce. I know that Lisa Abstein, our past president, worked very closely with the Revive Ed Committee as far as this is concerned. And me being new in my position, hadn't really thought too much about this until I recently got an email from a man named Dave. This email came on November 3rd, and he was looking to open up a business, plumbing business in particular, and I pointed him in Dusty's direction. And he sent me back an email after coming to town and being here for a few days, and specifically let me know some of the issues that he saw, and I'll read a few excerpts for you. He said, by the outward appearance of many of the buildings, there's no municipal code, and if there is, enforcement is lax. And He talked to a few people, and he said some of their suggestions show interest in downtown, but you fall short in some of these spaces of providing thriving businesses. And for those that are temporarily vacant, the buildings and grounds must be maintained as if they were occupied. My suggestion, painted, leak-free, inviting, not boarded up, overgrown, strewn with trash, hoarded out, or used as a parking lot for junk vehicles. In spite of these observations, Willits has potential. So this is concerning for us as far as the business community is concerned, because these are potential people coming in trying to start up a business in Willits and seeing the state of some of these buildings and saying, I don't want to deal with that. And from my understanding of this ordinance is not to put a hardship on those who are maintaining their properties correctly, but there are several that really aren't. And it is detouring future people coming in and opening up businesses in Willits. And that's something I think we need to be concerned about as a community, and that the city needs to be concerned about as far as income that would come in the form of taxes from those businesses in particular. So several cities all over California have these kind of ordinances. Willits is a little bit behind as far as vacancy ordinances are concerned. The city of San Francisco, I know much larger, but they have a vacancy policy. And they simply state that vacant or abandoned properties are community eyesores and also pose threats as public safety hazards and shelters of criminal activity. These buildings often are deteriorated beyond repair, overgrown with vegetation, and act as a potential dumping ground for debris and other hazardous material. These lots attract vagrants and often harbor illegal activities, which we have seen in Willits. They have both residential and commercial ordinances that cover their property. But the code calls for an annual registration fee, maintenance, and security requirements. The intention of these laws are to prompt owners to improve abandoned buildings, restore them to proper code, and have them refunded to community use. So I would urge you guys to really take a look and consider the cost of businesses not being able to come into these locations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this item on the agenda? If so, no? Nobody else? Okay, so put it up here to the council for discussion. And, yes, Jerry.
Well, I came on Revite, and I think Sabrina, you were on there with me, and we kind of came on after this had been discussed a little bit by some of the folks already on Revite. As Dusty explained, this has been going on for a while. And I kind of wrestled, Ruby, with, you know, you're kind of the exception compared to some of the folks in town that you're kind of who I would hold out as the example of somebody that is taking care of their building and is actively involved in trying to rent it out. And I know I wrestled with that when I was going to those meetings, because whether it's a market situation or just a location situation, I mean, sometimes it's hard for a piece of property to move, even though you have all the intentions, you're keeping it up, etc. So I don't want to penalize someone like you, but then we do have some businesses or some properties in town that are, believe me, really challenged when it comes to the effect they're having on the surrounding businesses. And you're right, we get those calls, well, what about them? And why aren't somebody doing something about those? Because they're attracting the vagrants, they're attracting the areas where folks are either dumping trash or doing whatever. I mean, I for one walk my dog with my little blue bag, but
You're an exception.
I know, and I've seen you out cleaning and all of that. So I am concerned that for those property owners that are out there that are keeping up, I want to make sure that we, as we move along with this ordinance, that we make sure those folks aren't penalized. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dusty, but I thought, I read this over, and we didn't talk about fees, but it was my understanding that the intent when the Revite Ed met was that, say, a business like yours, all you're going to get is an annual inspection if your property is not posing any, it's not obliged, not a health and safety violation. I thought we had got something like $100 a year to register the property for the annual inspection. Any additional fees were going to be cost recovery, so if you didn't have any of those issues, you're not going to be looking at additional cost. Is that correct, Dusty?
We certainly would work to craft it like that. What it does say is that we would collect an annual registration fee. It doesn't assume that it's like a sliding scale. Rather, you would look at the average cost. So, and I apologize, I'm assuming Country Skillet is your, okay, right. So not one of the problem properties that led to the crafting of this ordinance, right? And that you know, that was something that we struggled with, right? Because you have certain properties in mind that are causing the major issues, but then you also have the folks that are doing everything correctly, and it's probably more to do with the market and then other factors, as she alluded to. But no, the idea was to come up with a flat fee that would look at the average. And then apply that evenly across the board.
So I'd have to say I wouldn't support a flat fee that would penalize somebody who is doing the right thing for somebody who isn't. What I would support is a base flat rate where you go in, you do your inspection, and if they've met all of the criteria based on a rating score, you say you pass, here's your $100, you're good. If there's any further issues, we'll get back to you. And if they score in different categories, then they're going to require then incremental
Or more inspections,
fees.
or et cetera.
Yeah, until.
One big difference between some of these properties is I imagine, we go into a property that's well maintained. It's ready to rent. It's that turnkey property, right? But then we have others that aren't. They're near condemnation. They're in no fit shape to be rented out. And so that's a variable difference right there. And one tool that other jurisdictions require, and I think it was alluded to for the example in San Francisco, where they actually require you to, when you go and do those inspections, if your building's not up to par, the city requires you to fix it and bring it up to a condition that it can actually be made use of.
And that's what I thought that we were doing in this ordinance. And I thought that I read in there about the cost recovery. We didn't really talk specific dollars, but you did mention in the ordinance about cost recovery. And that's where I thought we were going to do a base rate and then cost recovery should we find that there's additional inspections that need to be made. So are you saying then that, there isn't any base rates. You're going to bring that back to us at a future meeting?
Yeah, certainly it is worthy of discussion today as to what type of fee you may want to see staff come back and recommend as soon as the next meeting potentially. And we certainly can look further into the idea of the variable scale where there is one flat fee, but then additional fees can come into play based on X, Y, and Z. And I'm looking at our city attorney here too. I know you've researched some other ordinances as well, and then we do have some potentially other legal remedies that we can use to sort of bolster up this ordinance.
Right. The draft ordinance that we have in front of us calls for a registration fee, an annual fee, and then renewal, same amount on something that needs to be, something that can't exceed the reasonable expectation of cost. And in addition, calls for, in the event of violation of the ordinance, failure to register after you've been given a warning that you need to do so. That's a violation that can be enforced the same as any other code enforcement, which typically is a daily fee. The imposition of an administrative penalty that by our ordinance could be as stiff as $1,000 a day. On a minor thing would be much less than that. And I was talking with Dusty earlier about my observation of some cities have their registration for less than an entire year, and maybe you'd have it on a quarterly basis. First you register your building and you pay a fee, and then in 3 months down the road, the city re-inspects and determines whether it still needs to remain a vacant building and requires a new registration fee. Or some cities do it every 6 months. So you can have some variation. It doesn't have to be an annual period. It could be something less. And a couple of city ordinances I've seen provide that if the owner registers his building and does everything that the ordinance requires and allows the inspections and has the insurance and does everything else that the ordinance requires under this ordinance, yet the building still remains vacant, and if that owner has not actively sought to lease it out or to sell it or to rehab it or sought out building permits to improve the property, then there can be a penalty imposed. And some cities have steep penalties. Sacramento and Palm Springs have like $1,000 penalty if it remains vacant after you've been given this opportunity. And then if 60 days goes by and it still remains vacant, some of these cities then increase the fee to $2,500 and higher amounts. So registration and paying a registration fee is part of it, and the other expense becomes administrative penalties if there's a violation of the ordinance.
Well, I wouldn't want to see it quarterly or semi-annually. As a business owner, that's just one more task, and sometimes business owners have an empty building and they have an existing business. I know many that do, and I wouldn't want to put that burden on them. I'm in favor of a once-a-year registration fee for the purpose of the initial inspection, and then again, like I said, some kind of a cost recovery for violations, as well as I'd be in favor of after an inspection, if it's not up to par and they're not listing it or they're not making the necessary repairs, then giving them a violation. And I felt like in reading the ordinance that it was pretty much in line with what the recommendation of the Revite Ed was.
Did you have something?
I just was going to say that I believe by definition, a building does not qualify as a vacant building subject to this ordinance and registration requirements and all the other onerous provisions if the owner is actively engaged with an agent trying to lease it or to sell it or to rehab it or has a building permit. And so in the case of the good property owner who just happens to have a vacant building, but they're making all kinds of efforts to get it occupied and are reasonably seeking out tenants, that I think would be a building that would not be subject to the ordinance.
Just a little bit of clarification on that. Really, what the city's, I think what the city and certainly Revite Ed is looking for is for folks to activate their properties and make use of them. I mean, that could be renting it out to a nonprofit on a monthly basis while you pursue a permanent renter. It could be allowing someone to set up an art gallery that's open one day a week, but at least there's art in the window that's displayed. And so that place has been activated. And so the example of someone coming up into town and just sort of seeing these closed up shop is now seeing an art gallery or an active nonprofit or something in the window. If you're able to do that every 90 days, that keeps you out of having to register your property and pay whatever registration fee that the council may set. Also, if you're actively remodeling your property or completing renovations, that also keeps you out of this, right? Because you're on the right path. Simply just marketing your property. And again, that's an issue in some cases where, talking to real estate agents, I won't name any names, but they recognize that what their client's asking for the property, and it's not the example here, is far beyond probably what the market value is. So in some situations, folks are seeking out Starbucks, but Jerry and Dusty's coffee shop is never going to be able to afford the asking price. But again, this is that balance of trying to respect private property owner rights, but also trying to introduce the true community cost of choosing to leave your property vacant. So One of the things that Mr. Lance mentioned was this idea of requiring property owners to upgrade their building. So if we go into a building and it's fine and they're actively leasing it, maybe we still want to do the inspections and come up with a minimal registration fee. But if that building is in a state of disrepair and is in no good shape to be rented out, maybe we then require them to upgrade that building, and if they fail to do so, then that becomes another penalty fee. And is that a potential, tool that the city could look into?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, Ron.
This is a scattershot ordinance. It's using a shotgun to do sharpshooting. And because of that, we're gathering in, this is aimed at hitting people who really have no business being hit. Like, there are property owners in this community that for one reason or another, their property is empty because they can't sell it for whatever reason, but they're making a good faith attempt. We all know there's at least one particular property in this town that is the target of this ordinance. And it's been vacant for like 100 years, and the owner has no interest whatsoever in doing anything about it. That's the people that we're targeting with this thing. And I don't think we even have to have I'm not even sure if an annual fee for all property owners that are, vacant under the definition is even necessary. Because, there's some properties you're never even going to visit. You don't have to. You drive by, you see what they're doing, and you keep going. That's the end of that. But there's others. For example, that hotel has been vacant for so long, and in the past, a window would break or somebody would squat inside or something like that, and the building inspector would go, or the fire or the police, or they would go and look over the thing, and they would call the owner and say, look, you have this thing, you have to secure it, and he would put in some window glass, maybe board up a door, and he would do the absolute minimum to get the city off his back, and that's not good enough. It's an insult to this town. That kind of building is an insult to this town, and I think that's what we're targeting. And that's what we have to target. That's where we have to focus on. So I was reading through some of the maintenance and security requirements, and I don't know, with all due respect, it's kind of wimpy. Seriously. All we're saying is we want you to, clean up the weeds and pick up the trash and blah, blah, blah. That's nothing. That is the absolute minimum that we would expect any, thinking citizen to do with their property. And okay, yeah, it should be part of it, but I think you mentioned in some of your summary just prior to this, there also should be a requirement about bringing the building into good repair, into making it into the kind of property that a new tenant can walk into. Now, I understand that there is so much you can do with that kind of thing because you don't know what specific needs a potential tenant will have. So, there's a certain point that you can't build walls and things like that. But, the plumbing should be in, decent repair, the electricity, there should not be holes in the wall, stuff like that. And I'm sure you can come up with reasonable lists of these things. But that's the real thing. When I think it was you that talked about your potential buyer who looked at some of these properties. That's the kind of stuff they're going to see. You walk down the street and you see this derelict building, you look, and it's derelict. It's not just vacant, it's derelict. And you look in the windows and you see this is terrible. So this is a reflection on the city as a whole. When we first moved here about 20 years ago, where Buster's is now located, there used to be a building called the Sprouse Ritz Building, and I think this was an old store or something, and it was vacant when we moved here. But you walk down the street, you pass by that building, you wouldn't have a clue that it was vacant. And this is what impressed my wife when she saw this, and this is why we decided we were going to move to Willits, because this is such a cool town. They had store windows facing Main Street, and the store windows were covered with white butcher block paper, And in front of the paper on the window side were drawings and paintings that were done by the local school kids. It was the most charming thing you've ever seen. We fell in love with this town because, oh my God, here's a vacant storefront on Main Street that has this phenomenal thing, and the kids are getting there to display their stuff. So, you know, a vacant building can do that kind of stuff. They can be required to do that kind of stuff. I don't think we should be able to, I don't think we should want to punish a property owner if they can't rent their property. There's a whole lot of reasons. If they're making a good faith effort to do so, I think we leave them alone. You know, maybe even help them if we can in some way. And we're helping them by getting these other properties cleaned up. So I would like to see this thing really ramped up a little bit.
It sounds to me, Councilman Mortensen, that you're making a distinction between vacant and blighted, and that the focus ought to be on blighted properties and not necessarily
Well,
vacant
yeah,
properties.
true, but then there are some vacant properties that have been vacant for an awful long time, and maybe technically, and I'm sure there's a legal definition of blight versus, you know, this, vacant. So we have to really be careful about that. I mean, if a property owner keeps a building empty for 20 years, but he does just enough that it's not, you know, blighted, I don't think that's good enough. I think there has to be a good faith effort for the owner to get the building occupied. And again, this is all subjective. You know, what a good faith effort is something that would have to be hashed out. But, you know, I think we can recognize it when we see it. Anyway, that's my feelings. I would like to really tighten this thing up a little bit more and even back off from, let's call them a typical property owner who happens to have an empty property and really wants to rent a thing but can't for right now because. And that would be a judgment call, I guess. I guess that would be your call or the city manager or somebody like that. That's what I see this thing going as.
Madam Mayor, if I could, just an observation. You know, I think if someone, maybe the wording needs to be changed somewhat, but I think if the wording clarified that individuals were making good faith effort, and maybe we could supply some standards as to what those good faith efforts were, they would be exempt from having to, you know, register and comply with the inspection portion of the ordinance. I think the inspection portion of the ordinance, otherwise, for those buildings that would not be exempt, establishes a threshold. Once you're able to go in, you're able to identify the problems, and then you can begin based on that single inspection. It's not as if you would walk away. You could then expect that certain improvements were to be made in order, again, for that building to comply with the ordinance. Finally, the only other point I want to mention is we did just recently have some discussion about a Sacramento ordinance that had, when an individual had a building vacant for a period of time and had been unable to, well, was not filling it, then it might be, as the city attorney said, subject to a greater fine. I would think that you might want to consider that, and you might want to consider a time frame of about a year, because if somebody is leaving their building vacant for a year, it really needs to be addressed. Those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, Larry.
I own a building downtown, and I have worked for 4 years fixing it up. And I agree, there are people that come through town that, if I looked at some of the buildings in the community, I don't know whether I would live here again also. And it's because that there's no way that anybody would move into the buildings to rent them.
because there's no paint inside. I mean, you can see that. There are posters all over the windows. There are broken pieces of side on the, on the side of the building. I mean, we all know who these people are. And we need to, like Ron said, these are the people that we need to do, and we're going to, the number one thing that I think in this ordinance is good is somebody has to be responsible for the building. So if you go off to Greece, you need to find somebody to be responsible for your building, because that's not going to cut it anymore. And so consequently, I mean, we need to start, as a council, we need to start calling it as it is, and somebody that is doing the job. I see these ladies down there cleaning this building every week. And I also see people that haven't been in the community to clean anything up for years. And everybody just says, oh, well, this is so-and-so. That doesn't cut it anymore. As a community, if we want to invite people in to spend their money here and stay here, you got to do something about these buildings. And as a council, we're on the threshold of doing that, and we need to do it. Into my spiel on that.
Thank you. I want to make some comments also. First of all, I wanted to say that I think this is a really excellent attempt to set up a system to move us in that direction. And I was very glad to see it, and I thank you for the work on that. And I think that in order to, we have to kind of give equal treatment to everybody. All property owners have to meet the same requirements. But those who are willing and able and are diligent and taking care of their properties, obviously, we don't want to penalize them. And if they're doing the best they can, then they should have the very minimal application of such an ordinance. But I don't think you can just say, based on, I walked by and that one looked okay, so they don't have to register. That wouldn't be good enough. I mean, you have to be equal. You have to kind of set up a system. But I think what Sabrina was saying is having a very minimal initial registration fee. And I loved what you wrote about why we're doing that, because it's partly to benefit the whole community, to try to get rid of some of the really problem vacancy buildings. But it's also an advantage to potential renters. Then we could have a clearinghouse so we can say, we want renters to be able to find a suitable place. And we want to encourage the property owners to meet some minimal standards so that a potential renter comes and says, yeah, I could live there, I could work there. So I think once you have the registration and you have this sort of bottom line established, then you can up the ante for people that are not cooperating and are not making improvements and not even making a good faith effort, so that it pushes it a little farther. I mean, I think this is a good first effort to get going in the right direction, but I also think we could perhaps, especially when we start looking at potential fees and penalties down the road, kind of push the envelope a little farther as we move along. So I guess my question of the council is, do we feel like this draft in the current form is enough to,
No.
well, I know you don't, but wanted to see if there's a will to act on this tonight or to send it back to staff with some of the comments that will help clarify what we do want. I tend to be on I think it's a good start myself.
I think it ought to go back. I think in view of the many comments that you've given us, that we ought to give it a second try. And rather than introduce it now and have material changes to it when it comes for adoption, it really needs, when it's introduced, there really shouldn't be but minor tweaking at the adoption stage. So I think you should bring it back.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked on the marijuana ordinance for months, and we had hearings and meetings about the thing and discussed it, and I think it's perfectly appropriate. you know, I don't know what guidance you had when you came up with this, but I think this is the first time I had, and most of us had. So, and I know you take these comments to heart.
And I saw a hand up over there.
You know, on Revite Ed, obviously, a lot of the same folks come to Revite Ed, some of the business folks, and then some of the, obviously, I'm going to use Ruby as a good example of the person who's doing everything right, but then there are some other folks out there. Part of having these meetings is so that some of the other folks are going to come out of the woodwork, and I really wanted to hear from a good cross-section of the community. I appreciate Mr. Roop coming in today and, you know, talking about what he's doing, but I really wanted to see that cross-section out there, because we kind of know what a worst example and what a good example, and there's folks in between. I think getting those folks in, and if we ultimately have to pass an ordinance to get those folks to start cleaning up, then I'm for that. But same thing, I don't want to punish the good folks either. So.
I would also like to see what our options are once we set up this kind of system. If we have the registration and we ask them to make some improvements, and they basically aren't very cooperative, and it's vacant a year later, and it's vacant another year later, to what are the ultimate penalties? Because, I mean, they own the building, and I don't know, you know, what do you do to them? We just got rid of, finally, that cleaners finally got demolished. How long was that there? I mean, that was just a blighted building.
Well, in a nutshell, if they don't follow the ordinance and they don't do what you've required them to do, and they don't register their building and so forth, the ordinance provides that violation is a public nuisance, and we would have code enforcement then cite them, and they'd have an opportunity for an administrative hearing and the imposition of perhaps daily fines. It could be significant, and then ultimately the recording of a lien or a special assessment against the property, and we have the right then, if we wish to foreclose on the lien if it's not paid and have the property sold.
That's what I was wondering.
The most extreme remedy that the city of Ukiah has just gone through, that's taken years of litigation, is a court-appointed receiver of the Palace Hotel, I believe, and that's, my understanding is that that has been a very difficult and expensive process, and one that we would not want to follow, perhaps.
Well, hopefully, property owners would get at least a nudge in the right direction to, you know, to be responsive, because we don't want to go to extremes unless it turns out to be necessary. But, I mean, an uncooperative owner, we know that there are some. So, okay, other comments?
Yeah. I know this is the first time that the council has seen this, but I want to acknowledge that I know that Dusty has talked about this several times with the Revite Ed, and those people have had an opportunity to weigh in discussion. So I don't want to invalidate that, even though this is the first time that we've seen it. And Jerry can vouch for the fact that this really is in line with what their direction was for Dusty to bring forward to the council. I agree that we should probably work on it a little bit more, but I'm a little concerned that I wouldn't want you to change it too much, because you don't want to lose the teeth in it, and I don't, you know, that sort of thing. But I also wanted to, from a business standpoint, present a different idea, and that would be that if you have an empty business in town, you want to make it known that you have an available building. And I know that back in 2002, I was out searching in another county that I didn't know well, and I was looking for a building to rent as an entrepreneur, to open up a building, and there wasn't a registry system, so I had to just drive around looking, you know, is that rented, and do some research and information. So I can see the advantages of registering your vacant building so that people know about it, as long as the city makes that information, puts it in a format that's easy and accessible for the business community to access, whether it's a link to the chamber's website or something on the city's website. The information has to be available, otherwise it then becomes, you know, irrelevant.
I'm confused, like, I have an agent, I've always had a real estate agent, so I mean, what more?
Yeah, you have an agent, that's what they do.
And I can't go out, I mean, I can go out and talk people into buying, but they always have to go through vacant, so I don't know, I mean, we would love to sell it.
But if I was an entrepreneur, I would have to see your storefront first, and then read the sign, and then call your agent. If there's a registry.
I'll call every agent.
I
Registry,
don't have a problem
for
with that.
example, I could go
Actually, that
online and go,
sounds
oh,
good
look,
to me.
there's all these vacant buildings, let me go to these specific locations and see which ones are gonna fit my needs. It's just, I can see that as an
I don't think
advantage.
anybody realizes, like,
So,
I don't wanna rent my property, I don't wanna lease my property. We've thought about it, and we had one potential that wanted to lease, but when you do a credit report, I mean, their credit's in the dirt, and we just can't afford to get people in there that can't pay. And
so
just-
I'm gonna have to ask you, we're not open public hearing anymore, but, I don't mind you making a short little addition.
Okay,
Well-
it's just like, it's not easy to rent a property
Yeah.
because people don't have money.
Dusty, didn't Holly do a thing several years ago?
Can I ask, Ron, that council members, all, not just Ron, but all, that you just indicate you want to speak,
wanna
so
say
I can keep some order, so please, go ahead.
Yeah, that,
Do we still?
it was for, she did a,
Was that
she did a
industrial?
mayor's initiative to identify all the vacant and possibly underutilized industrial buildings in the
Just
city.
just industrial?
Yeah, so a very similar tool of trying to match up property owners with prospective, buyers or renters. And again, the registration, as Vice Mayor Rodriguez alluded to, is hopefully a genuine tool to try to assist business owners. And it, I think what Revive Ed talked about was a very minimal fee, especially to start off the first year. I mean, we talked as low as something as $50. But again, recognizing that as time goes on, and you have these buildings that remain vacant for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years, the excuses for why your business hasn't rented become less. There'll continue to be those cases where it's really dictated by market and other factors, but at that point, you tend to have situations where we start getting into these landowners and properties that we've been alluding to. Before we're done, I wanted to try to get some clarification from the council, and I can do that now, or I can wait for it until after further discussion.
Well, if you want clarification from the council about the direction to go with your next effort, why don't you ask us what you'd like clarification on?
The idea of the sliding scale, so would we be suggesting a very minimal fee or no fee the first year to register with the city? And would you want to see that escalate over time, or no? That was one question.
Why don't we do one question at a
Okay.
time and just get any quick
What would
thoughts?
the purpose of the fee be?
To recover staff's, the city's cost for the program, for
Okay,
inspections.
but
for-
are you talking about just a registration or an actual inspection at that point?
Well, potentially either. Initially, it was to recover all of that, but then what we heard, I believe, from the council was the idea of maybe having a registration fee, but not requiring inspections for all properties. And so then certain properties wouldn't acquire the inspection fees, rather just the registration fee. But we didn't really quite tackle which properties would be subject to the inspections and which one wouldn't, although our city manager talked about standards of good faith effort to maybe try to draw a line there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little troubled by the registration fee thing. I mean, if you do that, then we could require a registration fee for every commercial property, maybe even every homeowner, to make sure they mow their grass or something. I mean, it seems like that might be taking us down a path that we really, really don't want to go down. So I'm not sure about the registration fee thing. I would say that there should be a registration with no fee, and you can look at the thing, and part of it should be an application that would have some description of the state of the property, and that would trigger certain action on your part. And at that point, if you're going to go out to inspect, then that would create another fee, or the fee. But just to put the name on a list, I mean, I don't know, that seems like a little much.
Jerry, or, yeah. Larry.
I think that when you look at, there are buildings in the community, in every block almost of this city, that have been just let go. And the thing that you need to do is, first of all, they need to be inviting. And those people that want to sell their place, and I understand where Ruby's coming from. I certainly wouldn't want to rent my place to somebody that their credit didn't work. So, you just can't afford it. So I think that we need to, first of all, register all of the properties that are vacant. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out the ones that maybe will pass the inspection, and the ones that won't. But if you have a register on them and have the owner, give it a picture. That's a starter. And then when that chamber goes to rent the building, then they can say, well, we have this building and this building, and this is what they look like. Would you be interested in going to this building to rent it or lease it or whatever that you want to do? Anybody that's going to do a business is certainly going to pick out the good one from the bad ones and then go from there. And then the ones that haven't been, nobody looked at them in a year, let's say, just as an instant. Then you go into them and tell the owner that you want to go into them and you want a safety inspection. You want a fire inspection. You want a building inspection. You want to make sure that it looks, like something inside. It's got to have a little paint. The ceiling can't be falling off and the wall falling in. And then go from there. We got to use a little common sense also.
Jerry, do you have something?
Yeah, we need to have some sort of metric for, I Dusty, I just want to get a handle on what would it, if it's just a registration and that's it, but I also want to be able to look at, and again, I'll just use Ruby as the example. Okay, here's an A property, and then there's the proverbial F property, and to be able to give staff so they know, hey, this is the metric we're using. We go in so that it may be that it's a $25 initial registration fee, and that covers the staff time it's going to take for that year ever, and I'm just throwing that number out, not that I'm married to anything, but if it's a giant, say for the sake of argument, a warehouse, believe me, I've walked in pigeon poop and almost fallen through second-story buildings in my former career, and those places may be that it's not going to be a quick, hey, let's see what you got, and if you furnish us everything in advance, it's a quickie inspection. And then obviously we need to have the fire department be a part of that conversation, so when you come back, so we have a metric of some sort. Hey, this is exactly, if we go to an A property, this is what I think ultimately it should cost or not. I obviously don't want to penalize the A property and basically that they're costing, it's not much of an effort to inspect them versus the one that's more of an extensive inspection. So I guess I just want a metric of some sort so that I could look at somebody like Ruby and say, no, here's this fee or no fee based on the level of inspection. And maybe it's just that they have to furnish you some basic information as part of that metric.
I know from speaking with our building official and our fire chief that the buildings that they're most concerned about or anxious to visit are those that have been vacant for a long time. So that could be a line in the sand, so to speak, where if your building's been vacant for X amount of years, that really deserves the attention of the fire department and the building official versus a building that's been vacant for, say, less than a year,
or one with an
or has gone through some permit process where a building official has been through there, but where I probably could use discretion and identify those properties that really,
But I want
common
something
sense wise,
dependable.
deserve something. I might get 9 out of 10 of those right, but boy, I sure am gonna get beat up on that one I didn't get right. So I do appreciate identifying some type of.
Yeah, so that way somebody doesn't say, Larry goes, you're charging me X fee, yet there's Jerry with his dilapidated building. He obviously cost you more time-wise to inspect than I did. Could have been a drive-through, kind of thing. So.
Okay, I wanted to hear from Sabrina if you had any feedback on that.
Yeah, I want it very, very clear. I don't want any discretion, any gray area. I'd like to see, for example, that $100, that's your registration, your initial inspection. Then each year you get a re-inspection and registration if need be. It's still $100 as long as you met all the criteria. And then we go to the metric system, which involves cost recovery, and you lay out a point system and how you evaluate the business. If you haven't met this criteria, then this is what it's going to cost us to keep you in compliance. But I don't want any gray area. I think that opens us up for potential litigation, and it makes it very confusing for the person who's renting the building to understand what the rules are. I like rules to be really clear, so that's what I'm asking of you.
It's helpful to staff as well.
And my feedback on that would be, also, I think it needs to be quite clear what the standards are. And my thought would be, what if we have, as soon as a business has, or a property's been vacant for more than 3 months is when they're supposed to register. What if they register initially and the fee doesn't, an inspection doesn't happen for another 3 months, or another, maybe another 3 months, and that's when a cost recovery would be required. So it kind of, hopefully they rent it in the meanwhile, and if they don't, it would just be a reasonable fee for inspection and meeting certain standards. But you'd already have it on file, so you would know what the timeline is, and you would know what the standards are, that the owner would know, and so would the city, something like that. But it could also be, I wouldn't object at all to an initial just $50 or something very minimal to register that initially, because it does take the city some time to, to do that, to do the paperwork, to keep a file, to have it available if people are inquiring. It just starts the process, and then several months later, you could say, well, if it's still vacant, we now need to inspect it. Okay, and the form that they fill out could also say how long has it been vacant already, and and does it meet certain standards? So you start collecting information.
Very good.
So what other questions?
Yes,
Sorry,
just
and
to
let's try
recap
to
that, I
keep
kind of
our-
heard a range of $100 to zero, and then sort of figuring out a tool to identify which properties deserve an inspection and which maybe didn't, and then having that be more of a cost recovery fee at that point.
Right, and I think
So thank you for that.
Yeah,
And,
inspection is not a it costs us something. We would have the building inspector and probably a fire person want to go in.
Right, and what I'm also hearing is that the council is not worried about full cost recovery for staff's time
Initially.
in for some of these initial registrations.
just
So
don't
that was
wanna
very helpful, thank
burden,
you. There was Councilmember Ornstein's idea of, well, I don't know I think it was just something you liked. I don't know if you were suggesting as a requirement, but actually having the vacant buildings put up some nice artwork on the windows to sort of distract someone from the true vacancy of.
Yeah, make an effort to beautify your property even though it's empty.
So more of a high suggestion versus a requirement?
Well, I don't know. The problem with suggestions is sometimes, depends on who you're suggesting to, it can fall on deaf ears. So I think we'd have to explore that and see just how tough that had to be.
Okay.
Give them one try, give them 2 tries, third try, you better do something.
Okay.
Because the other thing is that we're actually, if we don't do this sort of thing, what we're talking about sounds kind of harsh. But we have to remember that there are a bunch of property owners and business owners in this town who, they do the right thing. And if we don't make the others meet a certain standard, then we're disrespecting are good business people.
You know, I appreciate the council sort of sharing staff's struggle, and that when you, this ordinance and many others, you're like you said, it's the shotgun approach, but really you're aiming at a certain entity within the city, but you got to be, you know, fair, but you don't want those unintended consequences. The big question was the idea of requiring an owner to restore their building up to code. So for a commercial building, you'd be looking for some type of occupancy that would support, you know, general commercial use like retail sales or something. Understanding that, you know, an individual business renter may, you know, require to remodel or something based on their desires or their specific use, but at least having it so that it could be made use for a commercial use. And I'd say retail sales is probably the most general one you would see, but as an example.
Well, I'm assuming that would be part of this ordinance as it is.
Okay.
Personally.
Well, that matches with whatever their zoning is.
Yeah, I mean, this ordinance would only apply to those properties in the C1, C2, and CO zonings.
Okay.
So we're not talking about like home occupations or stretching it out to something else. Something Revite Ed was smart enough to sort of define what we're talking about as a vacant building.
Just wanted to be clear.
Yeah,
Jerry?
good.
I think what I envision is I go by an empty building and I can see the drywall from the roof falling or the building bulging, that sort of thing. Obviously, that's what I'd be looking at.
And I mean, some of that could potentially be captured under our nuisance ordinance. And if you can see it, that's one thing. But again, that becomes a reason that we really want to get into the building, because it might be that it's in that condition. It's just that we have no legal authority to get in there and view that. But what this is saying is not only would you be fixing up the hanging drywall, but you'd actually be fixing the electrical, plumbing, et cetera, to bring the property into a rentable space. And then, you know, the thought then becomes too is the tricky part is the ADA aspect of that and the cost that go with that.
And that's pretty significant.
Yes, it's very significant.
So,
In the interest of time, I was going to
anyways.
suggest that unless there's something that's really a policy guidance that you need to bring up here, that any of the council members that have some specific suggestions, or general suggestions, get them to you so that we can move along on this meeting.
Well, I think the last thing that
was the last question.
The last thing that he brought up was actually pretty important. Are we giving him direction that we want him to go that far as to bring the property suitable for a renter? Because if that's what we're asking, you're asking somebody who has a vacant building to make sure that it's ADA compliant, that it's got all these different things. That's a pretty significant chunk of money that you're asking somebody. Does the council really want to push that far? I'm going to say, for the rights of the person who owns the property, that no, I don't think at this time the city should push that far. I think often when you go to rent to somebody, you know, you negotiate with them how much repairs they're willing to do. I don't feel comfortable putting that big of a burden on the property owner.
I agree.
All right,
So Jerry said he agreed? Yeah, Ron.
All right, so in new construction, somebody builds a building that they intend to use for commercial use. So he puts up the shell of the building, and it'll drywall, you know, plumbing, electrical, drywall, that sort of stuff. And then he's gonna wait for the tenants to come in to finish, you know, the interior walls and the lighting and stuff like that. So I assume that there's a certain standard that's expected of the developer to get it to that point. Is that correct? Is there an accepted standard?
Right, the building official can inspect a property and say, yes, this has the correct occupancy and it is ready for a business to move in here.
And at that point, it's a generic property. It could go this way or that way, depending on what the end user needs.
It's not uncommon for a renter to come in and customize the property to their needs, but the basic shell is there and ready.
And the shell, when the tenant comes in, the shell itself will not have to be modified. Just interior things and will have to be done to order.
Most likely, that's probably what we're talking about when we say.
So I'm thinking that's the standard you should be looking at. for bringing these buildings up to repair, that kind of thing.
That's, yeah, right, understood. So there's some difference of opinion here, maybe.
Yeah, but that's the
And there are,
principle.
and I don't pretend to know exactly when ADA standards come into play and when they don't. I think that was probably something that becomes part of the decision of Freddie.
We want to be careful that we're not making it too expensive.
And also, yeah.
So maybe it's maybe come up with some language, bring it up for consideration, and
okay.
maybe it just gets pulled out.
I would bring two versions because I won't vote for it.
Right. Okay.
We want to be business friendly.
Understood. Okay.
Okay. Well, I think you did a very good first draft, and I'm looking forward to moving ahead with this. So thank you very much for that work. And the Revite Ed Committee, well, I'm sure the Revite Ed will look at it before it's.
Yeah, Dusty, will you bring it to Revite Ed first?
Okay, great. So moving on, we're at the consent calendar, and the items on the consent calendar are council minutes of November 8th and November 30th special meeting, disbursement journals, and a resolution to authorize access to criminal history information for employment, licensing, and certification purposes, which includes, but it's not limited to, the cannabis licensing and permitting.
I move to.
I second it.
Okay, to the whole, are there any objections to any items on the consent calendar? Are there any members of the public want to speak to it? If not, then we will have a vote. Can we just see aye, other than, can we do it by
Yeah, I don't think there's.
all those in favor of approval of the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
We need a vote. Okay. Informational reports includes the building inspection activity report, which was provided to us. The right to appeal. Any persons who are dissatisfied with the decisions of the city council have a right to review that decision by a court. The city has adopted section 1094.6 of the Code of Civil Procedures, which generally limits to 90 days the time within which decisions of the council and boards can be judicially challenged. Commissions, we are not meeting tonight as the Planning Commission or the successor agency. So moving ahead to the city manager's reports and recommendations. Rob.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the first item that you have before you is the discussion regarding the possible adoption of resolutions to approve an amended agreement with Stephen Willis for police chief services, and extending that term to June 30th, 2018, and approval of a short-term agreement with Mr. Don McQuarrie for administrative services. As the council is aware, the Chief of Police, Warnock, has been on medical leave since June of last year. Staff updated the council in October regarding this leave, and at that time it was estimated that the leave would be approximately 3 additional months. In October, the council agreed to award a contract to Mr. Stephen Willis for Chief of Police Services through the end of December 2017 to cover that period. Since that time, staff has learned that the medical leave for Chief Warnock may be extended at least through April, and it's possible that it could potentially be longer. Mr. Willis has successfully fulfilled the role of police chief since October, and will continue to be available to the city to perform these services, with the exception of a 2-month period where he has a pre-planned vacation. So staff is recommending that the council adopt a resolution amending the agreement with Mr. Willis through June 30th, as I've mentioned. During the period that Chief Willis will be out of the county, staff is recommending that the city retain the services of Mr. Don McQuarrie through a temporary consulting agreement to provide administrative services to the police department. Mr. McQuarrie will perform the administrative services that would normally be carried on by the chief on a day-to-day basis. Having Mr. McQuarrie serve in this manner will provide services during the chief's absence while foregoing the costs and requirements of background and testing required of someone serving in a sworn capacity. Mr. McQuarrie, as I've indicated, is eminently qualified to serve in this capacity. He's a longtime police officer with the city of Sausalito, retiring with the rank of captain. He has also served in a similar capacity along with Chief Willis in the city of Fort Bragg and the city of Seaside. I happened to contact the city manager for the city of Fort Bragg, who indicated the arrangement worked very well for them while Mr. Willis was on a similar vacation and out of the area. I should note that should Mr. Warnick be capable of returning earlier than expected, then these agreements would both terminate. I also want to indicate that you would only be paying one of these individuals during the time that they're present, so you're not double paying anybody for that period of time. We believe that this is a cost-effective way to continue providing the police services that the police chief services that the city needs during this period of time when we're impacted by the absence of our current chief, and suggest that the council adopt both of these resolutions by separate action. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item on our agenda? If not,
I'll move to adopt.
I'll second it.
You want to do it in two steps or?
Yeah, they should be separate. There are separate resolutions,
Okay,
separate action.
So I'll move to adopt a resolution, approve the amended agreement with Stephen Willis.
and
Yeah, I'll
Larry,
second
you
it.
seconded it? Any discussion by anybody up here?
Yes. As much as I like and appreciate our police chief, at some point we have to have a further discussion about how much longer we're going to do this. Because last time we had approved the contract, we had stated that December was the end of the period in which before we would go out and possibly look at a new police chief, and now we're talking about 6 more months. And I know it's a difficult decision, but how long are we gonna go without a police chief?
Madam Mayor, if I could, first of all, there is a couple of things that are progressing. One is that there is a work. He could be continued. This could be considered a work-related injury, and so he's going through a qualified medical opinion evaluation the 1st of February. We should have that completed and back to us within a month. And that's important in terms of determining what ultimately happens. The other, just to advise you, at the present time, the medical indication is that he's positive and he's progressing, and that it is possible that he could be back by April. I would suggest that if there's an indication that that's not going to happen before then we bring back the question to you as to what do you want to do long term. I do agree that you need to make that decision sooner than later. April would more or less be the drop dead date for making that decision by the council. That would at least give you a couple of months to get recruiting for a new police chief if that becomes necessary.
Yeah, I'd like to see us put it on the agenda for March or April to reassess, have a
I think
discussion.
March.
Because otherwise, if we wait till June, we could
Absolutely.
possibly be looking at extending this further while we go out to
Yeah,
look for.
I don't know if we have to actually put it on the agenda because I think our city manager is staying on top of this.
Whoops, it's an earthquake.
Yeah.
See, the earth just moved.
Still going?
Still
Well,
moving.
But I would say that we would leave it up to you, because you're on top of this, obviously, and you're aware of the timeliness of any further action we have to take.
I would, though, I agree that that March timeframe would be acceptable to bring back an update to the council. I think that would be appropriate at that time.
We'd
So
also
we,
afford you an opportunity to work with HR and so
Right.
that all the,
okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and if there's no further discussion, let's have a roll call vote on that.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
yes.
Stransky.
Yes.
Morrissey,
Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes. And the second motion,
I will, oh shoot, I just lost my screen.
the second motion is to have Mr.
Yeah,
McGuire.
I will move to adopt the resolutions and approve the short-term administration services agreement with Don McQuarrie.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion on that item? Or public? Okay. In that case, let's do another roll call. Look at practice.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Stransky,
Yes.
Morrissey,
Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Strong.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, I just would like to introduce to the council Mr. Don McQuarrie is
great.
in the audience tonight.
Thank you.
Are you feeling talked about?
Not sure about this earthquake thing.
Well, that was God saying, okay, we'll do this.
Well, we hope that's what he
Welcome
she was
aboard.
saying.
Or waking up the audience.
Okay, so we're now at the rest of the city manager reports.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'll keep this brief. I know with the cold weather, the icy conditions have been a concern, and I want to let you know that the Public Works crew is out and sanding the major streets that we have and bridges to try and resolve some of that problem. I also wanted to let you know that I did participate in a meeting yesterday at the county along with Chief Willis. It was a meeting that was called very late, I'll notice very late, but it was a meeting it was an after-action report to discuss what worked right and what didn't work right with the county in terms of the Redwood complex fire emergency. Fortunately for me, I happened to be here on October 11th, as you'll recall, and I did participate in a status meeting with the ROES and felt I had a good handle on what some of those issues were. The primary one being communication and the lack of communication. And I did bring those matters to the OES coordinator at the county, and I intend to follow them up with a letter that I'll copy the council on. That's essentially the report.
Okay. All right. Other administrative reports, city clerk? We appreciate your sitting in, city clerk, thank you. Finance, no, we don't have finance. Human resources is here?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry to make you wait so long for your item.
I know. Good evening, Mayor Strong and council members. Karen Stevenson. You have before you the agenda summary report for the job classification for police corporal title to be reintroduced and effective 12/18. This is a classification that we omitted a couple of years ago because we had 4 sergeants and we certainly weren't using that classification. The way it's set up is that we currently only have 3 sergeants, and due to our budget constraints, we don't have the ability, it's not feasible to seek a fourth sergeant. And so we currently are using a police officer in a field training officer mode, which is the FTO, and also a supervisory capacity. And according to the Police Officer Association MOU, someone who's in this capacity for more than 36 hours on a continual basis gets percentages added to the differential pay. And the particular individual that we have is doing this particular job for over 2 years. So what we're electing to do is to bring him in as a corporal title. Right now, he is a police officer. There's no addition to headcount, there's no addition to budget. What we're simply doing is, because the police officer, they have a quasi-military hierarchy, and not only is it going to improve morale, but it's going to allow this individual to not only supervise, but do some of the additional responsibilities that a sergeant has to do, which is approving reports, writing evaluations, managing performance, approving arrests, and employee timesheets, and so on. So again, it's just they're still at the same pay as a police officer, they just have a higher rank, and therefore they're able to do additional jobs that a sergeant is currently doing. And based on our budget, I don't see that in the foreseeable future that we'll be able to put another sergeant in place.
Okay, for that report. Ron?
All right, so clarify something. So this is a police officer who has been doing some of these duties, and now you're proposing that we promote this individual, I guess you have an individual in mind.
Correct.
To corporal, but with no pay change.
Well, see, how it works is if you are in this role and you aren't doing it 36 hours consistently, then you don't necessarily get the 2.5% and the 5%. So
No, this is referring to what, the retirement package?
no, this is to their pay.
Okay.
So they're actually performing two separate functions. It's two differential pays, and because they are in this, he's doing this consecutively for over 2 years. What we want to do is give him this particular title. So all it does is change his title. So from there, it gives him a higher rank and is able to assist the sergeants with the additional.
I understand that part of it, but I assume that if he's promoted to corporal, then he would be doing this at least 40 hours a week, correct?
Well, more than 36 hours, because they work
Okay, so
36 one
okay.
week and 44 another.
Madam Mayor, I think I can resolve this.
Jerry has his hand up too, 'cause, yeah.
This is what is typically called out-of-class pay. He's basically doing these duties,
Yeah.
and because of the out-of-class pay, he's already receiving the 2% and 5%.
Okay, so he is getting a differential right now.
Right
Correct.
now.
And what you're saying is that promoting him to corporal will not change, that the differential will become part of his salary.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I.
Right.
Okay.
I was just gonna add that, and this contract language has been there for a while. He gets the differential pay for being a field training officer, and then the way the contract reads, if he's in that position of filling in for a sergeant for so many hours, then he gets bumped up. All this base, and at this point, because of the fact there is no other sergeant in the mix, when I left the department, I imagined a different configuration, but when folks left, that changed things. And so all this is doing is giving him the title. He's already getting the pay. So when whether he interacts with other agencies or within the department, he's basically got the authority in name, even though he's...
Yeah, I'm not questioning the pay. I wasn't sure that he was getting something extra.
Yeah, he's been getting it for
Okay,
2
that's
years.
fine.
Yeah, okay.
That's good.
I'll make an motion to approve the new job classification for police corporal effective December 18th, 2017.
I second it.
moved and seconded. And any other discussion? If not, I think we probably need a roll call on this one too.
Yes, you do. It's money.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Rodriguez?
Yep.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Public safety, do we have a report? The police department make any report to us or not?
I'm sorry.
Do you wish to make a report to the council?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Steve, maybe you could tell them about the graduation that you're going.
Oh, I could, just an update on personnel. We have one officer that has given his final resignation. He has a firm date, so his last day with the city will be December 28th, although he will be on the payroll, I believe, until January 4th. We have another officer that is close behind him going out the door. He doesn't have a final offer yet, but he has gone through the background, the medical, and the psych, so it's imminent. We have a officer who happens to be the brother of our new corporal, who will be graduating from the College of the Redwoods tomorrow. So I'll be going up for that graduation along with contingency from the department, and we'll be welcoming him back. He'll be starting in the field training program on Sunday. We have three other applicants that are going through the background process to fill the pending vacancies.
What is the head count at this point? And with the new people coming and going,
We have 6, I believe we'll have 6 officers, 3 sergeants, a corporal, and a chief.
And a community service officer.
Pardon me?
A community service officer.
And a community service officer and 4 dispatchers.
So that's about 10 uniforms, is that correct?
11, I believe.
11. And I forget, I keep losing track. What does our organization chart look like? What are we authorized?
That would bring us up to strength.
Okay, good.
That's with the reorganization, dropping the sergeant, dropping a CSO, I believe there was an officer added. And that's the one that is in the academy now.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, community development. Would, Dusty like to make a further report?
Thank you, Mayor Strong. Just a few things. Larry, if you don't mind passing out the report on our community development specialist there. While she's doing that, the council had previously requested that the owners of the former Remco property come and provide an update to the council. Unfortunately, they were not available. I was able to meet with one of the owners and find out how things are going, see if there's anything that the city can be doing to help assist seeing some sort of appropriate development at that site. I think I reported previously that they do have an application into the city to rezone a portion of the property from industrial to commercial, and this would be the front portion of the building that faces Main Street. Upon receiving a successful rezone, they do have hopes of upgrading that building and hopefully finding a tenant for that space. No update on the back end of the property. I should mention that where that sort of stands in the queue is we have a couple long-standing minor subdivisions that we'd like to bring forward for your consideration, as well as the housing update and associated zoning changes. So again, as the cannabis stuff got that through that, we've been hurriedly trying to get these other almost becoming legacy projects to you. And then again, as always, there's always other things that come up as well. So tonight it was the rent control deal. So again, it's there, it's important. and we'll certainly try to get it to you as soon as possible. It could be as soon as February, and I would hope that it wouldn't go beyond bringing it forward in March.
The February one
The
would be
Remco.
the
Mhm.
rezoning?
Yeah, the rezone,
Okay.
yeah. At this point, we received 3 cannabis activity permit applications that came up to about 40 grand in application fees. So those have been collected and are currently being processed by the department. I want to say that, I can say that the most sophisticated applications that I've seen in my year and a half by far for the city, and so that's a good sign. We're certainly looking for those that have the desire, capacity, and to do it right. And so we'll look forward to working with them through the process and making sure that their businesses can be consistent with our ordinance.
Has anything been approved yet at this point?
No, those applications came in 7 to 10 days ago and are being referred out to departments for review, at which point I think we're going to identify a number of building improvements that likely have to be completed in certain situations. But the ball's in our court to let them know what needs to be done to move through the process.
Good.
Others are a little bit closer, and although I don't know that they'll be up and running by the end of the year, we certainly want to do our part to put the ball back in their court so that hopefully that can happen sooner than later. Anticipate several more applications potentially coming in before the end of the year, and many more probably in the months of January. A lot of folks are recognizing that there's a lot of upgrades to the building that needs to happen. There's a lot of requirements in our ordinance as far as putting together a proper submittal. And then another folks are still looking to acquire properties throughout the city. So there are various stages of getting applications into us.
Can I just add on that subject?
Yeah.
The gentleman that spoke during public comment was interested in a building that apparently he already owns or rents or something that was in the C1 zone.
Yeah,
and that isn't
the
allowed.
gentleman's still here, and yeah, the property that I believe he was speaking to is one of those properties that's zoned C1, and certainly the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee and the council, had quite a bit of discussion about whether or not we should allow for a variety of cannabis activities within the C1 zoning district. Ultimately, the decision was, the balance was, we do allow testing labs and research facilities in C1, but beyond that, there are no other cannabis activities allowed. What the gentleman that spoke earlier tonight was, I believe, alluding to was possibly the idea of looking to open up the C1 with upon obtaining a discretionary use permit. So
At the moment, that's not allowed under the ordinance
under the
that we
current
adopted.
ordinance, we
but,
wouldn't be able to
you know, maybe
entertain an
after we have
application at a C1 zoning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I also want to mention that there's been considerable parts of the day where the phone rings on, I just went ahead and did a little math, on average of 6.5 minutes. So I'm getting a phone call about every 6.5 minutes for the beginning morning of the day till about 11. And then folks that didn't get a call back then try out about 4 o'clock on, which is great because a lot of it is folks that are interested in establishing businesses, or it's not necessarily all cannabis, right? We received the high-level phone calls on a lot of days before that, but again, this just becomes a balancing act for staff, and you want to call people back in a timely fashion, but at the same time, you want to write minor subdivision reports and get you information on rent control and everything like that. So staff continues to work with the city manager to prioritize our workload and strategize how to be efficient with our time. Let's see, you have the report, I believe, now in front of you for a community development specialist who's been with us about 2.5 months, Mr. Jim Robbins. He's been a great asset to the city in his first 2.5 months. He's hit the ground running. I've heard good things from our colleagues about him. You have a list in front of you with a number of the items that he's been working on. and continues to work on. And
Mr. Dooley, I also want to indicate that he's been active in assisting you with the processing of the permits, especially the cannabis permits, as well as answering phone calls, et cetera.
Yeah, not so much the processing of the permits, but he was he did pretty much all the work in helping develop the cannabis activity permit applications, which I would not have been able to get that done and get that on track without his help. So thank you for pointing that out. And we continue to rely on him on a greater number of planning-related duties every day. And so, yes, he has been helping assist with the processing of the cannabis permits, and I'll be bringing him on to try to help as much as he can. But again, certainly focusing on the grant opportunities as they come forward as well. So again, it's just a balancing act of prioritizing and making sure we're
When are we going to have somebody who's specifically working on cannabis issues so that we're not using a grant writer?
Yeah, so the idea is if we are able to collect adequate fees through the cannabis activity permits, we receive permission to hire an assistant planner / code enforcement whose primary, if not sole duty, would be to deal with cannabis activity permits and related matters, which at that point would really free up the community development specialist to.
So what's the timeline? When can we expect that we won't be using a grant writer to deal with cannabis?
It will, Madam Mayor, it will take us a little bit of time. We'll start after the first of the year working with our HR coordinator to do those recruitments, and just it will be a matter of how long it takes those recruitments to be completed.
Or how long it takes to realize the funds as well.
Yeah.
I think the direction we got was not to pull that trigger until
enough applicants have come in with the fees that will then support that job. Because if the ones that we already have in was all we got, we better not commit to a new position.
So we've gotten 3 so far, and we have not pulled the trigger on that hire yet.
We will begin the process, though, in January, so we'll have somebody identified by the time we reach that.
The trigger point.
I just want to remind the council of the discussion that we had when we hired the grant writer. I know later it evolved and changed, and we talked about using the grant writer to help with cannabis, but when we go back to the original conversation, and Adrian and I had a conversation that I'll share, that she promised me that we were going to stay with the intent of what we voted for at the time that we approved that grant writer, and I was very worried that with her leaving that the intent would change, and indeed it has. And I remember, Larry, we had a discussion about how would we evaluate whether or not that grant writer was successful at their job, and we had stated that at the end of a year we would look at the applications and see how fruitful their work was. Well, now we're talking, their role has evolved and changed. So when we go to do that evaluation at a year, I mean, we can't hold the person to the same standards that we originally intended, because they wouldn't have had the opportunity to achieve what we initially intended their role to be. And therefore, I would not have voted in favor of it since their role has since changed. But I also understand that we're saving the city some money because we don't have enough applications yet. So I see the logic in it, but I don't like the fact that I approved a position and then it changed, and it's going to cause me hesitation in the future in approving any position if I think that there's a possibility that the role is going to change significantly that's not in line with what I believe is best interest of the community and those that I represent.
That's an interesting thing that you had this conversation with Adrian, because I had a conversation with Adrian at the same time as well, and she assured me that this person would be primarily working with Dusty on these permits and then secondarily on the grants. So we're getting different stories here.
And I remember us having this argument in public as well.
And I have a hand up from Jerry, and so
Madam Mayor, I just want to point out for the public and everybody that Dusty has done what we've asked him to do, which is the update. And looking at this list, and I sat down with Mr. Robbins and talked because there were some grant systems that I had to kind of sign over to him so that he could continue applying for grants. And you know what, he's been really busy. And also, I think I cautioned all of you that sometimes grants, it's not like we open the door and all these grants pop out and we apply for them. They come in spurts, and not all of them. I talked to him about where some of these grants are, and obviously he's found more that I didn't know about. And they come, some are in the Federal Register, some are out there. Actually, we chatted about maybe even looking at private grants also. So I think he's hit the ground running, and he's done what Ron had wanted, which was to help take some stuff off of Dusty's plate. So I, for one, am happy. And as the money rolls in, because we are budgetly challenged, and we want this cannabis program to pay for itself, that I, for one, am happy with the progress. And obviously, the proof is in the pudding. When we get to the end of the year, hopefully we'll have had some money coming in, and that will offset the cost of permits and proceeding on with the program as it evolves.
Thank you.
I also think that the juggling act that you and the city manager are doing is appropriate, and I appreciate your ability to be flexible and try to do both things at the same time, because and then keep reporting back to us as it moves. It's a moving target. So,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And then
oh, you got more.
Oh, all right. Well, let's see here. This update on the EV charging stations in the parking lot between Mendocino and Wood Street. Staff's met with PG&E, Mendocino Land Trust, who holds the grant money, as well as the private electrician. Staff is in the process of putting the designs together, and we're hoping to begin construction in January. So those are moving, that project's moving forward as well. And then I just finally wanted to say, with the dry cleaning business, I just appreciate the efforts of the property owner and that family for, completing the demolition of that blighted building. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy task, and there may be some ongoing testing and remediation of that property, but staff looks forward to working with that owner or a future developer on making use of that property. So with no questions on any of that,
Okay, thank you, Dusty. Public Works and Engineering, we have a specific item. Are you presenting that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll present this in summary form due to the lateness of the night. Actually, you had considered this item in October. Essentially, what this project is to provide a means for changing out and retrofitting some of our lights at our city locations with LED lights, and the goal is both to obviously save energy as well as long-term costs for the city. Outlined in the report, you'll see what the relationship with G-Von LED. They're our lead contractor we're working with. They will actually purchase the fixtures on the city's behalf. They will go ahead and get the rebates. That's how they make their profit. And the cost to the city for the lights purchase will be primarily the sales tax. As mentioned, when this originally came to the council in October, staff had planned to do the installation, but due to the delay in getting this back to you, which was partially just scheduling, we need to get the installation completed in January in order for the lead contractor to take advantage of the rebates. So we've gone out and solicited quotes from firms that can do the installation in a timely fashion, and we're recommending that we award that to RES Electric for a cost of $13,250. And then the other cost to the city is the actual disposal of the fixtures, and that's a cost of $799. What we're anticipating is that with these the fixture changes, it'll bring down the demand by about energy demand by about 50%, and so that for these fixed city facilities, that will save the city approximately $6,500 a year. And so staff is recommending the recommendations you see before you: the replacement of the fluorescent fixtures above, and awarding that contract to Givon LED. The total cost of that will only be the sales tax. Staff recommends a contract with RES for the installation at $13,250, and the total cost to the city is going to be $18,243. That amount includes a contingency in case there are necessary change orders. That contingency won't show up in the contract, but will be just available with your approval in case there is any kind of a change order. The budget has been reviewed, and in these particular line items, there's sufficient funding available because we're at this point in the year where we haven't spent those amounts yet, so we're basically redirecting existing authorized funding to this project, and won't have any new or additional impact to these various funds. That includes $3,296 to the general fund, and let me see, $4,271 for sewer, and $4,471 for water. That concludes my report. Susan Laustis from the Public Works. Suzanne is with us tonight. She's been waiting very patiently, and she has a young one at home that she needs to get home to, so we appreciate her staying so late. Anyway, we're both available in case you have any questions.
Is the $799 for the disposal of the old fixtures, is that included in those fiscal impact?
Yes.
Okay. Suzanne, do you have any thing to add to what Bob has said?
Just that the payback period's just under 3 years.
Okay. And is there any public comment on this item? Jerry?
I'd like to move staff's recommendations. I know that it's spending money, but I think overall we'll save money. It's just going to take us 3 years to realize that. So I make a motion to move with staff recommendations.
Anyone want to
Second.
Okay, Ron seconded. Any other discussion on this item?
Yes. So the $13,250 that we have to pay to install the lights, is that because the council delayed on taking action last month?
Essentially, yeah, we felt that with this short a period, we didn't have the staff would be able to accomplish it before the end of January. So we thought it best just to get it out to a independent contractor for that reason. Had it been in a place where you could have approved it in October, staff most likely could have done the installation. That would have still cost you some money because they would have been working on the city dime while they did it. But anyway, that's the impact.
It's just, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking it's times like this when we're in a budget crisis that we should have taken advantage of realizing a portion of that savings, and our delay is costing us money in a time when we need to save money. We need to be mindful of that when we're making decisions.
If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And Madam Mayor, I'd like to thank Suzanne for staying
For
so long.
staying so long. I'm sorry it took so long to get to that item. Thanks
You made a
for-
good decision.
Thanks for being here. Okay. I gotta go back to my
I'm
agenda.
gonna go home now.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Okay, so no other reports from Public Works?
No.
Okay. So City Council and committee reports, League of California Cities,
We have not met.
MCOG.
MCOG met last Monday, and we went over the items, public hearing on the unfunded problems of picking up people, unfunded, unmet transit needs is what it was.
Oh.
And we did not come up with any that we could afford, and so the money will go to the cities and the county. The next one was a public hearing on the State Route 162, which is the City of Covilo's project, and it's going through its last stages to be funded, and so that's where it is, and it's way long overdue. In fact, I have the book if anybody wants to read it, and it's quite interesting. Actually, I didn't think that it would take this long to do it. And the last thing that I have, I sat by a person, and this is way off of my duty here. I sat by the gentleman from Ukiah, and I have been interested in asking him for 4 or 5 months what the stacking lane is going to look like on Talmadge when they have the new Costco. And I have the pictures of it if anybody is interested, and it's going to be a feat. I think that, anyhow, look at it, and I've been asked, to give it to you guys, and so just pass it around from person to person.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's going to be a thrill.
Economic Development and Financing Corporation, I attended the November 8th meeting instead of Sabrina, November
Yeah.
9th, which was the most recent meeting. And there were several interesting things on the agenda. The particular ones one of the things the broadband committee talked about looking into what went wrong during the Redwood complex fire, and getting AT&T and Frontier to really get better accounting of what happened and how they could do better in the future. Backup systems, undergrounding, transformers and wires are part of the problem, and it could have even been part of the cause of the fire. They also reported that EDFC has lent almost $6 million since 2000, and has, according to their records, created 250 to 300 jobs. And on November 30th, so just 2 weeks ago, they moved in with West Company and gave up the lease that they had there in the back of the Methodist Church in that building. So they're now basically co-renting with West Company, which they're very excited about. Very nice synergy between those two groups. And then I brought to them the fact that Well is wanting to have, and maybe in conjunction with Chamber of Commerce and the city perhaps, having a how to revitalize the Willits economy using services of EDFC, West Company, and local experts and entrepreneurs and so forth. And so we're planning to do something like that in late February. So that's EDFC. MSWA is meeting tomorrow morning here at 10 o'clock. So that's the next meeting that I'm reporting on. MTA, would that be
MTA has not met, but just want to remind those college students that MTA is still offering free bus service to Mendocino College. You just have to go in and get the sticker to put on your ID card so that you can receive the free service.
Oh, on MSWA, I just wanted to mention that there's a 3-year plan that the new general manager has put together, and it was, to me, very impressive. It really covered all the different services that MSWA provides and kind of goals and strategy for each of the duties of MSWA. So it's kind of, the new manager is taking things in hand. Now, item local agency formation commission.
Yeah, that's me. Met this month, and we had a continued public hearing on the Fort Bragg Municipal Service Review. It was really good. In fact, Dusty seen it. We're in the process of doing our sphere of influence, and so that's important. They had 2 workshops, South Coast Fire Protection District and the Albion Blue River Fire Protection District, and those, they usually do a workshop and then they do a public hearing on the, so that's what they did.
Thank you. Finance committee?
The Finance Committee hasn't met. I did want to schedule a meeting for next week if that's possible. As I understand, the members of that committee are the mayor and vice mayor.
That's correct.
Yes. So I would be looking to set up a meeting if the 2 of you are available on Thursday of next week. Does that work?
I don't have my calendar, but.
Probably.
Okay.
Is that by regulation that it's always the mayor and vice mayor?
You'd have to, the committees are set normally in January.
Yeah, all the committees you'll set.
Yes, well, I want to add that.
But it's always the mayor and vice mayor for the finance committee. It's always has been.
Well, when you say it always is, but it isn't necessarily.
You want to change it, change it.
I'm just wondering if it is required.
The only reason is.
Find out who's interested.
is at this point, I'm under the understanding that it's the mayor and the vice mayor. And since we just made that change, I'm thinking you would be the 2 to at least attend this meeting unless you decided in January to change how that is set up.
Okay.
Does
Well,
that? Okay.
While we're on that subject, I would like to hear from each, not right now, but from each of you separately, which committees you want to continue to be on, if you're on ones now, and if you have preferences for which committees you are most interested in, so that I can evaluate that.
We just have to be careful about breaking the Brown Act.
You know what?
Well, yeah, if people let
If you're
me
talking
know.
to each of us.
I have a suggestion with that. How we've handled it in another city is we can just list those committees out, committee list out, and send it to each of you. You mark off the ones that you're interested in, and then we can forward that information to match.
That's actually the way we've done in the past. The city manager has always sent the list out to the council members.
Sounds good to me. Okay. Okay. All right, going on. And meanwhile, I think we'll move ahead because finance is important. Water and Wastewater System Committee, who was?
Did not meet.
Did not meet, okay. Revite Ed. Yes.
Do we have a date yet?
I believe we still haven't said something.
What's this?
Looks like it'll probably be January at this point.
Caltrans Ad Hoc Committee, is that still?
Yes, we did meet. If the members don't mind, I'll give that report. We met with Caltrans last month, actually, shortly after I came on, and both the members, Councilmember Gonzalez and Stransky, were in attendance at the meeting. What they did is they updated us on the relinquishment project. It looks at this point that it's going to be phased in different phases. The first phase is actually going to start probably in January, and that will actually be the trimming and removal of about 12 trees along the boulevard that are necessary for the infrastructure. My understanding that these trees have been identified jointly by both the city and Caltrans, and with the input from Mr. Watts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Dave Watts, yeah.
And the next phase that will follow that the next phase is going out to bid and probably will be done this summer, and that will be the infrastructure phase, which will mean the sidewalks and anything that needs to go in underneath those sidewalks will be done at that point. And then a final phase will be the actual paving. The reason that they're breaking it up this way is that it seems that there's more dollars going to be available for the paving than originally thought by dividing it into these different years is what it amounts. The final paving won't be done until about 2019. But you'll have a resurfacing done when they finish the infrastructure. So it'll look like a new street, but they'll still have some work to do. One of the things that we stressed is the need to communicate up front and to, with the public as to when these different phases were going to occur. And I just yesterday received a contact from Caltrans about identifying a press release relative to the tree trimming and tree removal. And what I'll do when I get that is I'll share it with the Caltrans committee members to make sure the wording is right from their perspective. And we'll also talk about the one-to-one contact that up and down the street to make sure that people are aware. And finally, what I thought I would do is offer, it's close to the end of the year, and I would like to work with the newspaper in maybe developing an end of the year article that I would author covering some of the major items that the city's taking on, and I would emphasize the phasing of the relinquishment program and when that would occur.
We have three local medias, the two newspapers and also the Voice.
Okay.
Two questions.
Yeah, I had a question too, but that is, is it 12 trees being removed and then other trees
being trimmed? I think so. And
so 12 trees removed and additional trees being trimmed, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Okay, and
so who and when will the trees be replaced? Who by who and when?
Was there any discussion regarding that?
No, and I think in some areas, Claire, you jump in if you remember differently, but in some areas they're doing sidewalk work. It may not involve, there was some input brought in as far as, what we'd like to see as far as trees, and Dave was able to kind of give us some input.
Well, I guess the question was, who's going to replace the trees? Who's going to pay for them?
Won't be the city, I can guarantee.
Will not be the city.
No, won't be
Okay,
the city.
but I get that in some areas there may not be a tree that comes
Yeah,
back.
okay, but I mean, it's going to be on their dime. The other question I have is, several months ago, the council authorized $1.5 million to be put towards the relinquishment because Caltrans had requested that. I had heard since then that need has been withdrawn. Do you have an update on that?
Well, the only thing I can say, and again, what we were told, I'm not sure that need has totally gone away, but it sounds with their approach to paving, that may resolve the issue.
They're also looking at funding some of this from other pots of money.
But I guess my question is, are we still on the hook for the $1.5 million, or?
It depends upon the thickness of the paving, and we can't use any of that money from the sales tax for trees or anything else that the beautification.
All right, but what you're saying is that it's possible that we still may have to come up with that money or not?
It depends on, there was a talk before I got on the thing last year about the thickness of the paving.
Right.
And so possibly we will use some or all or whatever, they don't know exactly yet, which is Caltrans's way, but for the thicker paving, and that's what we had decided as a council, that we wanted the thicker paving so that it would last longer.
So we would probably pay for that if we.
The extra part, if we want to add it, yes.
Obviously, our goal is to have Caltrans fund
As much of it as possible.
and a state of good repair, which is not very well defined, but certainly seems to us, I think, all of us, that should include paving that's going to last many, many years, not something that's going to start breaking up right away. But my understanding also was that some of that $1.5 million was for things like if they put in the utility services for, say, some landscaping, that they won't actually do any landscaping or any. So some of the things that are in our plan for what we want to see in Main Street we may still be on the hook for
Well, you know, in trying to clarify that a bit, the pledge still remains there because we have not received any formal request to withdraw it.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay.
Madge?
Yeah.
The one thing that I stressed is that we do not know how long it's going to take for the sidewalk, curb, and gutters and things, and they're starting on Highway 20 and going north. And so the one thing that I mentioned was that the streets, the commercial part of the community doesn't want to do that during Christmas. So as mayor, that's one thing that you're going to have people, you think this was a big crowd, you just wait until somebody starts tearing out the sidewalk and stuff during Christmas time, from Thanksgiving or November to December. So you need to really stay on that one.
I think anytime they see it being torn up, it's going to be.
And we discussed some other key dates like Frontier Days and some of those.
Yeah. Really, I mean, it's going to be a hardship whatever time, but there's some certain ones which are simply unacceptable. Yeah. Oops, my thing went that way again. Okay, so feasibility study for the wastewater treatment is not met. Museum Advisory Board.
Yes, a lot's happening with the museum, and I hope to share more of it with you at the next meeting. I believe you all got a packet. Did you get a packet from? Yeah, get an envelope from the, looks like this. Only I got one, maybe?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll share it with you all then. I'll have copies made and give out. But there's some things going on with the county museum. The advisory board has, in the past, Allison Glassy has kind of been in the leadership role of keeping the group together, and the group is now in a position where if we want to advocate for the museum, that we're really going to have to step up our game, get organized, and state that this museum is important to us, and take our cause to the Board of Supervisors. And so at this point, the advisory board is just looking to get our act together so that we can promote the museum. I have a lot I want to share with you, but I think I'll wait until the next meeting because we're going to have another meeting before then.
And then the next one is also your bailiwick, the Willits Tourism Board.
Yes, the tourism board, lots happening. I think I had mentioned that we had a meeting coming up, and indeed we met last week where we seated all 13 members of the new board. They came from the city of Willits, Brook Trails, county, events people in retail, lodging, hospital, and community at large. I was voted in as the chairman of the board, Allison Finley as the vice chair, Jan Rodriguez as the CFO, and Matthew Kane is going to act as our secretary. We opted, rather than to fall under the Chamber of Commerce, we decided to form as a 501c3. So the executive committee is going to be working on the bylaws on January 10th. And then on January 24th, the group will come together again and we will do a SWOT analysis, working on our strengths and our weaknesses so that we can put together a very clear mission statement and set out our objectives and goals for the next year, which I hope to bring to you by February, a clear presentation of what this group hopes to accomplish and the timeline for that. Before my time on the council, it's my understanding that the council approved $10,000. You made a contribution to the Chamber of Commerce for a new logo and such. They spent $5,000 of those dollars working towards that, but didn't achieve that objective. And so the Chamber of Commerce opted not to spend any further dollars. So those $5,000, the Chamber has agreed to move towards this joint project that the city and the Chamber have embarked on, which is the Visit Willits Tourism Board. So they'll be using those $5,000 as their startup capital. And the only expenditure that we've approved at this time is simply the cost of filing for the 501c, those basic costs. So if you have any input that you'd like to give in terms of how the council would like to see any of those funds directed, I'm happy to bring that back to the group. We've already given it to them, so we can't solely say how it's spent, but certainly council's preferences are important.
I don't believe that I recall that the logo was one of the significant things of $10,000. I would not have voted for it if I thought they were just doing a logo. We have lots of artists in the community, and that would have been.
It was a marketing
But
plan.
it was a marketing plan, and it was
never came
especially
through.
to get a lot on the internet. And I don't know, I haven't checked to see what's happened there.
Nothing
but that,
happened. They never
Nothing.
came back with a proposal.
Yeah, but
They spent the $5,000 on a company to give them a logo for their marketing plan. They didn't like any of the 3 drafts and didn't move forward with it, so the $5,000 was lost. The good news is that there's 5 left, and I promise you, as the chairman of this Visit Tourism Board, we'll use this $5,000. We'll manage that money very carefully. And I look forward to any input that the council has on how they'd like to see that money spent as well. Bring forth
the other 5,000
the proposed
back.
projects and how we plan to fundraise towards those projects that we want to do.
Well, you know, that $10,000, when that was granted to the chamber, and then they went ahead and they did this logo thing. They never ever came back to the city to ask our approval of the thing that they never got anyway. And as someone stated, it wasn't just for the logo; it was for this whole marketing plan. And the company that was hired failed. They just never came up with anything, and the city was never kept in the loop. So, you know, I'm not real crazy about this extra $5,000 that hasn't been spent being out there somewhere without any kind of control. I would like to hear reports before anything is spent. I would like this council to approve any more expenditures of that $5,000.
I wasn't around then, so I don't
Yeah, I
know
know.
if the council.
No, I'm telling you
I
this
don't know
is
if
what
the
happened.
council has the privy to decide how the $5,000 are allocated at this point, since it was given to the chamber
Under conditions.
for a purpose, and we're still serving that purpose with the Visit Willits Tourism Board. But those of you that were here may have information that's relevant.
Well, like I said, that was not the way it was laid out, and they failed to keep us in the loop.
Yeah, it was also not supposed to be the only funds. It was supposed to be an effort that the chamber was putting a fair share into. So they spent our money and they didn't come up with anything and they didn't consult us. So I share some concern about how that was handled, and I think that it is fair to expect that there should be that you should come back with how you're gonna spend the other 5,000, and I'm not happy with how they spent it this time.
Just keep in mind that it's not the Visit Tourism Board
I realize.
that made that mistake, and we're more than willing to be held accountable and report to the council and take council's advice
You know,
on.
it's not you,
on that.
it's
Yeah, of course.
the chamber that did this, and we just want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And we just, I want to make it right with the $5,000, and that's why I'm asking the council's, you know.
The principle is still the same, that it's for putting the city out there. So if you can accomplish that with that money, that'll be well spent.
Any other comments on that? Because we should move on. We are on council member reports and recommendations.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm quite concerned with emergency. And when they turned, PG&E turned our PG&E off, and everybody in the city was without natural gas. I understand that the hospital got a truckload of gas, natural gas, that they hooked up to their utilities to use the stoves and whatever there at the hospital. And I think that as a city, we used the city chambers, not chambers, but the other building over there, where people had some place to go and that didn't have, in fact, Sabrina was the one that started it. And I think that we need to have some kind of an apparatus at the city where we can tie into one of those truckloads of natural gas so we can feed the people that, I mean, if we have a major, fire or earthquake or whatever, in about 2 days, everybody's gonna be real hungry in Willits and maybe not be able to go from Willits. And I would like to have an apparatus set up that PG&E knows that they owe us a tank load or whatever it's gonna take, and also the piping that it's gonna take to make the natural gas go from the truck to the stove. And I don't know how it all's gonna work, but we're gonna have to come up with something, because the senior center and the community center are gonna be two places that people are gonna go. And they both need that kind of facility. And we as a council, I think, should start thinking about this, because it might not come when we're prepared, and we need to be prepared. And so I don't know if the city would check it. I will check with, after Christmas, I will check with the hospital to see how that they did it and report back to you. But I really think as a council that we really need to be proactive on the things, and a portion of food and the things to make for our population.
Well, the city manager is the emergency
If you don't mind, we do need to, and I know that the Councilmember Gonzalez, while I was the police chief, is working on it. We need to update that emergency operations plan and include the identification of exactly where the shelter facilities are, and also to detail the things that Councilmember Stransky is talking about, so we can be better prepared. I happened, in this meeting I happened to attend yesterday, they did mention the hospital. They were actually received canisters from PG&E.
Actually, they received tankers, I believe, one or two tankers.
Yeah, it was a tanker.
And that was done through PG&E,
Yeah.
and they came in, and I can go into some specifics, but I don't think that would work in other places.
Okay, well,
So I would like to just suggest that that be something that we get a report back on, and not try to micromanage it right now. So moving, any other council member
Yeah, I was very pleased to see the sales tax reports that were sent to us. And I went through them, and in case nobody's had a chance to review them, the last report that we had went back, I believe, through March of this year. And as I recall, it showed a drop of about 16% in sales tax revenue for the city during that 1 quarter period, or from the time of the bypass. And this report that we have in these little thingies brings us into June.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we're down maybe a little over 4%.
Right.
Which is not bad. And that's just the beginning of the summer traffic, so I'd be interested in seeing what it is through September. So the bypass, I guess what it's saying is the bypass really did not have a huge impact on the city. I think that's a general statement we can make.
Not on that subject, but I want to congratulate Madge and Sabrina on your ascension to your new posts. I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to serve as mayor this last year. It was a learning experience, and anything I can do to help you out in your positions, let me know. And so that's what happened. So I was elected to serve the people of Willits, and egos aside, that doesn't belong there. We're here for the people, and we're here to work on problems and to work on problems within our jurisdiction. So.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We don't have any ordinances and any good and welfare that we haven't already covered. And if not, we have no closed session items. I declare this meeting adjourned at 10:02.
10:02.